one of the classic IDs of the Nordmann's Greenshank is the bicoloured bill. You know, the yellow half and sort of the darker half at the bottom end of it. So all I could see was two tones. I couldn't even make out that it was yellow. You know, and it was the thickness of the bill. There was like a white eye ring, and it was sort of, the body was about the size of a great knot. And I'm recording, and then it gave a one note call, lifted the wings up. I got it all on video within the first 5 minutes.
And that's the amazing thing with video, isn't it? Video, I love video because you get thousands of frames that you can choose from.
Oh, absolutely, and it's all 4K on the Nikon P1000. I've got it permanently set to 4K.
Right.
So you got the highest quality, and you can take any of those frames, if it's steady, and it can look like a very, very good photograph.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast. I'm your host, Thomas. This is going to be the last episode of season 4. I'm going to take a little bit of a break between this season and the next, just to recharge the batteries and refresh, get some fresh ideas, and take a little bit of a break. So I've got a big back catalogue now, so you can go back and listen to the first episodes if you haven't already. So enjoy this last episode of the season with Adrian. It was a fantastic episode. Before we jump into that, though, I'd like to give a shout out to Jonathan Tickner, a listener who wrote in saying, "Hi Thomas, just wanted to let you know how much I enjoy listening to your conversations with birders. Having recently retired, I now have time to pursue my interest in birding, and I must admit I have become a little obsessed with making up for lost time. Anyway, I found the Peter Vaughan interview very interesting and the conversation thought-provoking. Peter spoke so eloquently about birds and birdwatching, it was a joy to listen to. Yeah, that was a great episode. If you haven't already listened to the episode with Peter a couple of episodes ago, definitely do so. That was a great episode. One thing that caught my attention was your discussion about pursuing one's interest in other creatures and plant life while birdwatching. You mentioned that you thought it might somehow reduce one's knowledge of birds if attention was given to observing and learning about other life forms. While I get what you are saying and understand that one needs to be pretty focused while birdwatching, I have also discovered that many birdwatchers seem to have a very basic or non-existent knowledge of the plants and animals which inhabit the same living space as birds. I think that if we can learn a bit more about the whole context in which birds exist, the trees they live in, the flowers growing about them, and the insects and other creatures they feed on, etc., then we are possibly in a better position to fully understand them and their needs and their role in the ecosystem. In urban areas, there's probably been a lot of trial and error in the choice of plants and the arrangement of vegetation, sometimes leading to unexpected results, for example the encouragement of noisy miners, because of a lack of holistic understanding of bird behaviour and habitat. Please keep inviting interesting guests and talking about these issues, which you have been so expertly doing in your podcast. Best wishes, Jonathan." Thanks so much, Jonathan. That's very nice of you to say, and I really appreciate you writing in. Yeah, I guess what I meant by that comment is that it comes down to the jack of all trades, master of none sort of idea, where if you have lots of things going on and lots of interests, that maybe that your interest or your knowledge level of each is going to be diluted a bit somewhat. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I was getting to. But you're right. If you grow knowledge about the ecosystem as a whole and the different components apart from birds that make up the ecosystem, then you end up raising the knowledge of the whole thing in one level. I definitely see what you mean, and it was great to receive your email, and I love that. It's one of the first times that I get a listener write in and kind of counter what I said, which is, I love that. It's really good. So if you're listening and want to write in, definitely do so. birdingtoday@gmail.com is where you can reach me. So thanks so much, Jonathan, for writing, and I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's jump in. It was a great chat with Adrian. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and it was the longest on the show so far, so we really had a great in-depth discussion about lots of different things. So let's dive right in. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you on the other side, and thanks for sticking with me this season. It's been great. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Doerig. Today's episode is going to be a grand episode, I feel. Today's guest hails from the town of Southport on the Lancashire coast of northwest England. He developed a passion for birding as a young teenager and would frequently cycle a round trip of 38 kilometres to watch birds for the day at his local RSPB reserve, Martin Mere. As he grew older, his passion for birds took a back seat to his creative streak and his passion for playing the guitar and songwriting, which would lead to big dreams and hundreds of songs gathering dust in his mind. He also loved the earth sciences, so did his undergraduate degree at Royal Holloway College at the University of London's campus in Surrey. He had an incredible encounter with the golden eagle in Scotland while mapping Glencoe Valley, but survived to tell the tale and graduated with an honours degree in geology in 1986. Fabulous. My guest today worked as a junior geologist on exploration oil rigs, getting posted to Southeast Asia for a few months, before returning to the wild North Sea and deciding that the oil rig lifestyle didn't suit and the UK was too cold for him. So, at the age of 23, and taking the advice of his father to move as far away as possible, a bit too literally, he emigrated to Australia to start a new life and a new career in the emerging IT sector, a field he still works in today. After living and working in Sydney for 12 years, he and his wife had a sea change and moved to Cairns in 2006, and shortly after moving, his first daughter was born, which was almost immediately followed by twin girls. Birding took a back seat for many years as he raised a family, but over the last few years he has been rediscovering the obsessive passion he had as a child. He's probably most well known to Australian birders for his identification of the mega-rare Nordmann's Greenshank on Cairns Esplanade in 2021, but he has also spent the last 18 months writing a paper on the intermediate egrets with Chris Chafer, which was recently published in the Journal of Australian Field Ornithology. You'll find him most weekends scootering up and down the Cairns Esplanade in search of interesting birds. And I've got to know him quite well over the past few weeks or so, so please welcome Adrian Walsh on the show. How are you, Adrian?
I'm great. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks very much for having me on your podcast. Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and let's dive right into the central core of the show. And I'm excited to talk to you about this because we've had murmurings of it when we were in the field together. The joy of birding. What is it about birding that brings you joy, essentially?
Well, it's sort of, you can make the answer very simple, or you can make the answer very complicated, can't you? And it just really comes to the core of, I suppose your motivations and the things that sort of make you tick, which a lot of the times for us, it's a little bit of a mystery, really, isn't it? But for me, it's a multifaceted experience. But there's a part of my character that sort of likes to solve things. So before I sort of maybe, with these sort of questions you give, you want to do your best, and you want to provide, an answer that's sort of entertaining, and sort of meaningful as well. So I had a long think about this, and it sort of came down to one word for me. But before I get to that one word, what I'll do is I'll be all super pretentious and philosophical, and basically quote it was an 18th, 19th century German philosopher called Arthur Schopenhauer, and I'm not one to sort of quote verbatim a lot of famous people, but this is a quote that I've sort of kept with me for many decades now, because I just think it really sums up basically part of the essence of what I'm looking for, not just in birding, but in life. And so Schopenhauer said, thus the task is not so much to see what others have not seen before, but to think that which others have not thought about that which everyone sees. And so I absolutely love that phrase. If you take anything away from Schopenhauer's writing, just take that quote away, because I think it's just a masterful construction. And so the words that sort of comes to basically with me, and sort of the joy that I feel when I do bird, is discovery. So discovery for me sort of, really sums up, I think, to the core of my being. I was a child that grew up and sort of loved mysteries. I soaked up anything that was written about things that were, mysterious, like cryptozoological stuff and all sorts of things like that. And I sort of, got my claws into them, and I loved and other facts as well, and figures and anything sciencey. It's sort of, I gravitated towards that far more than I did works of fiction. I was really attracted to anything that contained a fact. And so when you're talking about birds and discovery, it's basically the excitement of the process of discovering the identification of a bird, no matter how sort of relatively easy it is or relatively difficult it is. It's that process you go through, and it's not just seeing, it's also the sounds as well that that you listen to. So observing the behavior basically of a bird and discovering things you hadn't noticed before as well. And it's the discovering for yourself. That's one thing I absolutely love, is just to park myself somewhere on the Esplanade, and actually discover those things for myself, actually start wondering about, if you're watching a bird for a long time, the behavior of the bird. So to me, birding is sort of a never-ending sort of discovery in many ways. And there's so much we just don't know about birds. And not just in the present moment, but also when you're talking about the past as well. And that applies to any sort of knowledge, really. I remember I was in Thailand once on this. I'm going to digress heaps on this, Thomas. I was in Thailand once, right, at the end of the 6-month trip with my wife, Renee. And we were sitting on this remote beach in an island called Koh Lanta. And so the waves were washing onto the beach. And so by the time you've reached the end of this 6-month trip, your mind's just completely free. We'd taken this huge break from work, and I was watching the waves coming off the shore, and it was just the way they were ripping for about 100 meters, in this shallow piece of water, and they were just ripping back and forth really slowly and quite rhythmically. And I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting, because I can't actually remember having seen that before. That particular event, the way it was happening. The way I've described it probably sounds as though you've seen this all the time. It's a common occurrence. But, having grown up by the ocean in the north of England and, spent a lot of time in Sydney as well, observing the ocean, it was just something, the particular way it was doing this was something I thought, well, that's interesting. It's something I don't recall seeing before. And then that sort of leads you off down a track of, how many events or things do we have knowledge of or have never seen during our own existence? Never mind the events and things that are happening, out in the universe. You extrapolate that not just through the present moment, but through the history of time. And you suddenly realize how minuscule and inadequate your knowledge is of anything, really.
Right. Yeah.
So I take that with me as well, because it's really sort of a holistic approach, isn't it, when you're birding? So I take that with me as well, that knowledge as well of, I really just don't know anything, people might come up to you and think you know things, about birds, but the way I approach it is I approach it as sort of as if I don't sort of really know much at all, and the cynical people I know might say, well, that's quite true.
Well, that's what I was going to get. I was going to get onto the fact, something I picked up on was, you said discovering for yourself. So what do you mean by that exactly? And when do other people come into the picture, other birders? Because a lot of birding by definition, well, not by definition, but often is a social activity.
Yeah.
And so, we can dive into that right now, because that's a really interesting sort of aspect of birding. Birding alone versus birding as a group with other people, because they're very, very different types of birding. And you can have that discovery as a solo birder, and you can have that discovery with a group, in a split second, with something flies over or something comes in to land, and both of them are similar, but there are differences. What are your thoughts on group versus solo birding?
Yeah, so I think generally I lean towards solo birding, and it's not because I'm not a friendly guy. Anybody who's bumped into me on the Esplanade, or I'm up for a chat, and I'd like to think that I'm a friendly and approachable sort of person. But yeah, in terms of birding, for me, it is more of a solo activity, because I do like to sort of have that quiet time, to observe to myself. And it probably also relates back to how I learnt to bird, as well. So we'll probably get onto that on the next question, basically. But the whole process of me birding when I was a young teenager was solo. I basically did it on my own. I didn't know anybody who was my age who birded. And I probably also didn't tell anybody that I birded either, apart from, my family sort of knew I did it, So the exact reasons for that, I don't know. They're sort of really lost in time, but it obviously, to a degree, comes down to who I am, in many ways.
Yeah.
And, in some ways I feel as though sort of I'm split. There's these two parts of me, there's that part that just really likes to be on my own and really likes my own thinking time and really likes my own space. And there's the other half, which can be, chatty and sociable. And, like when we first met, we've met a few times now, and sort of I feel as though, you're the sort of person that I can sort of, free think with and just talk with, about just about birds until they're, blue in the face, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's fantastic when you find someone like that as well. But if getting to the core of what your question was, and how does that compare to a group situation? So I do go out on the group trips. The Cairns Birders organise, weekly, and I know there's a core group of people that basically go every week religiously, and I tend to sort of not go, and it's not because I'm not sociable or anything like that. It's just that I've got my own ideas about what I'm going to do with that weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, I work full time during the week. And sort of, I've got 3 children, who are teenagers. So, that does take a lot of your time, and it's really enjoyable time as well. So, my weekends are quite sort of precious to me. So that's the time, I get to spend those 2 or 3 hours to myself, on the Esplanade. And so I pick and choose, when I'm going to do the social stuff. If there's a Michaelmas K trip, I'm on it. Put me on that boat, because I just love going on boats and to those the islands we've got here. It's absolutely fantastic. So that part I don't mind, and you sort of approach that with the knowledge that you're going to miss stuff, because you are going to be talking to people, you are going to be chatting to people about stuff. I had one of the Cairns Birders events not so long ago, which I was really interested in, went to Rob Side's house up in the mountains, and we also got to stop at Abattoir Swamp. So that to me was like a massive carrot. We're going to meet at Abattoir Swamp, and I'm like, I don't care what you're doing after that, I'm going.
Absolutely.
Because I live down in Cairns in the lowlands, in the suburbs, and that's all that rainforest stuff is stuff that I'm not. I feel as though I'm a novice in that area, because I'm not there. I don't live there, and I'm not there all the time. So although I do know a lot of the bird calls, there's a lot I really don't know. And so that in a way it's exciting, but then again I'll miss stuff, So I remember we ran up in the forest after we'd been to Abattoir Swamp, and there was stuff that I just missed because I'm not attuned, because I don't sort of live there, and I don't spend a lot of time there.
That's right, and it's different types of birding everywhere, and yeah, we'll get into the time management and the how you manage your birding time. I'm really excited to talk about that. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I think, as birders, we don't really have these conversations. We don't have really a platform where we can, where we're not going to get distracted by a bird passing over and then just keep walking on the track. But to bring it back and to kind of start a chronological sort of story going, talk to me about how the very first memory that you have of birds, and how you first got interested in birds specifically. Do you have a pinpointed moment in time that comes to mind?
There is not a pinpointed moment.
Right.
I'm probably not quite as young as you, Thomas. So, Not saying I'm old or anything. Maybe my kids think I am, but I'm 54. And actually, I'll correct you on something. I graduated in 1989. I made a mistake there.
Right.
So we'll just clear that up, because people are probably going to do the calculation. Go, hang on, he graduated in 86. He's not 54. Must be 50, 57. No, I'm 54. And so yeah, it's sort of another question I thought a bit about, and I was racking my brains. Was there one thing? And no, there wasn't really one thing. I think as human beings, we all have this attraction to birds, regardless of whether you're a birder. There's something about the fact that birds can fly. And I think there's a lot tied up with human beings and their mythology, for thousands of years, and the stories we tell. And so I think the fact that we can't fly and they can fly, and, we look at that with awe. So I think there's something inbuilt into all of us, not just the people who then go, oh, I'm a birdie, because I'm really interested. I think all of us, have a certain level of attraction towards birds. If I'm to think of a very early memory, it's in my hometown of Southport. And this goes for a lot of English towns. They have some cracking local museums that you can visit. So you can imagine the history of somewhere like the UK, where you've got prehistoric ruins alongside Roman ruins, and there's a lot of history, in the island that you take for granted. And so there was a museum in Botanic Gardens, it was called, just in the north end of town, and this museum had things like a prehistoric dugout canoe, as you do, lying around, and had lots of other knickknacks. But the thing that just blew my mind as, say, a 5-year-old, because my parents would take us to this park. There was 2 parks in town. One was Hesketh Park and one was Botanic Gardens. We'd feed the ducks in Hesketh Park, and then we'd go to Botanic Gardens because it was near where my mum's parents lived in town. And they had this taxidermy display, in these glass cabinets of, I reckon it was every single species of bird in the UK. And that to me was just mind-blowing. And that Botanic Gardens also had live birds in cages.
Right.
They weren't necessarily, they were more exotic, parrots and stuff like that. And for some reason, I wasn't interested in that at all. My memory is I was just drawn, fascinated by the birds, behind this glass panel, with all the little, markers, as, this is a jay, and it would have the scientific name. And because you can actually get really close to them, and actually have a really good look at them. I mean, they were a bit faded, someone had probably caught them in 1932, and stuffed them, So some of them were looking a bit ragged, the colours were a bit faded, but that to me was just like, I think if you're going to pick a moment, that might have been it, where that just sort of sunk into my subconscious. And I was like, every time we went to the Botanic Gardens, I wanted to go to that museum. That was the one place I wanted to go, have a look at those birds. I mean, I'm sure they had a golden eagle in there, I mean, it was just, you can imagine back in the day, they'd just shoot anything and, just stick it in just stick it off for display,
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah.
You're talking about, great ages of scientific discovery, but during that, process of discovering things, we tended to sort of, kill a lot of stuff, didn't we, and stuff it,
Yeah.
Probably still doing it to a degree, but not to the same degree, I don't think, that was done in, the 19th century.
Thank you for listening to the Birding Today podcast. It's great to have you with us. If you're enjoying the show, don't hesitate to leave a positive review on whichever podcast app you're using at the moment. This really helps with getting the podcast up in search results and reaching more people. Thank you, and back to the show. And were your parents or your family in general orientated to nature in any specific way, or were you branching out of the family tradition in some sense to really dive into the passion for nature?
No, not at all. So I think you have to, if you're talking about that sort of thing with the family, I think I have to come back to my father. So my father was basically a painter. So when he was young, and I don't mean painting walls, I mean, he was a figurative painter. So his whole life, he actually died earlier in the year, unfortunately, in February at the age of 85. But he, ever since he could remember, he was just an artist and drew things and painted. And so his whole life was just about observation, about observing things. He was a master at not just observing people. I mean, most of his paintings are figurative and they're stylistic. So that's what he would graduate to. But I think he had an affinity to birds as well. If you look at a lot of his paintings, he often paints people in surreal situations. And there's always a bird. There's sometimes a bird stuck in the corner, or a bird on someone's head.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, obviously he grew up with that mythology of the symbolism of birds as well, and the dreams of birds and stuff like that. So he incorporated a lot of that into his painting. And so even if he wasn't a go out hardcore sort of birder, he would still notice those things when he was out in the countryside. And he had and I'd have to get into my eldest brother as well, Martin. He also did a bit of birding when he was a teenager as well. And so my father had this 1961 copy of A Field Guide to the Birds of Britain and Europe. I was reading this here, so I don't forget it, by Peterson, Mountford and Holland. And it's a beautiful field guide. It's fantastic, and I think it's got pictures of eggs in it as well. I think a lot of the older ones tended to do that as well. And it had it was a hardcover book, and on the binding was a hoopoe.
Oh yeah,
on embossed, on the binding. So that book was always in the house. So it was a 1961 copy, and I'll have to ask my brothers about this. I'm pretty sure he bought that. It's original. And so from 5, 6, 7, that was one of the books I get down off the shelf, and I flicked through it, and he had his checklist. He ticked off the birds that he'd seen, because he didn't actually. I won't get into it, but he didn't paint. He painted all his life, but that wasn't his job. So his job, he worked basically for the local council, and he ended up being the chief foreshore inspector for the whole of the Southport beach and the coast. So we're talking about 8 to 10 miles of beach, which includes a 19th century pleasure pier, which is the second longest pier in the UK, Southport Pier. So it's over a mile long. So that sticks out onto the the mudflats basically of Southport Beach and the Sound.
Yeah.
And so he spent a lot of his working time walking up and down that pier and sort of observing the piers, observing the birds he could actually see off the pier as well. So I think he basically, whether it was his sort of observational skills, he sort of passed on to my eldest brother, who then sort of did a bit of birding, and he had books as well. He says, I remember when I was young, I'd sort of look through Martin's books, and sort of he had a methodology for doing checklists, and I think. I thought, oh, gee, I'm going to copy off this. This looks really good. So I can't remember how old I was then. I was still pretty young, maybe 11 or 12 or somewhere around that age. And but I remember at the age of probably 13 or 14, I bought my first field guide. So I think I sort of relied on my father's field guide, and then I actually bought my own in 1982, and that was a Hamlin Guide to the Birds of Britain and Europe. And I've still got it here on the shelf.
Fabulous.
It's completely tattered and torn.
as it should be, eh?
So basically that's, got my early sort of, ticks in it. And my original birding books, my checklists as well, I think when my brothers were clearing the house out back in Southport after my dad died, they found one of my early checklist books. So I've got to basically get that off them when I go back, because I've got to transfer a lot of historical data, because I had a lot of sightings at Martin Mere, because the birding's changed. If when I look at what's being seen on the Lancashire coast now, it's a lot of stuff's really different, So I think my early list from 82, 83, 84, will be very interesting to look at, to see actually what species, I did actually see there. And I bought Bill Oddie's Little Blackbird book, that came out in 1980, and I must have had one of the very early copies of that. I don't know where it is now, unfortunately. It might be hidden in my loft somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. But my dad also had heaps of binoculars lying around the house.
Right.
That, were ones that were left in lost property, from his work. So he'd sort of bring stuff home. So, we had sort of, huge big chunky, binoculars from World War II and stuff like
Wow.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
so that was, and he had telescopes, and so we didn't have a great deal of expendable income, but we had the materials needed to actually do things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but yeah, so that's basically the crux, I suppose, of how it all started for me.
Interesting. That's and every birder has a different story. That's what doing this
Yeah,
podcast especially. I realize that every story can be wildly different.
yeah,
In terms of how a birder becomes a birder.
this is
And
it. Yeah,
and I want to this is interesting because I want to delve and commit a little bit more time on that early stage of your life where you were a birder, and you said that you didn't really have a group, or you didn't know many other birders. Was that a result of you not approaching others, or was it a result of the lack of birders in the area, do you think?
I don't know whether it was a lack of birders. I think I was talking to you about this at the swamp the other day, about sort of the UK and how it seems to be a country. I'm not saying it's the only country, but it appears to be a place where if you want to collect something, or if you want to have a hobby, it's a hobbyist nation. There's everything and anything there that you can make a hobby of, and so there are a lot of birders in the UK. I think I read a stat that there's something like 3 million. The country's got 65 million people there, so I'm not sure how accurate that is. And obviously, that's people who identify themselves as
Right.
birders.
Right.
So there were certainly birders around, but I don't know why I didn't. I mean, certainly not at school. I wouldn't have I kept it, like it was almost like this secret,
Yeah.
I wasn't going to tell anybody, it's,
I remember feeling the same way actually at school, and it does happen, and if there's any young birders.
even though I wasn't the really sort of kid who got bullied or anything.
Right.
It's the sort of thing that kids look for. If you said you were going to go and do, they'd find anything, and sort of have a go at you about
That's
it.
right.
So you could only admit to doing really cool things, So which is a real shame.
It is. It
is a real shame. I think the school and my kids are going to, is just seems to be completely different in that vein. So I don't know whether it was the school I went to. I'm really not sure, but plus, it comes back to my character as well, doesn't it? It's like I did not mind, spending time to myself, and actually, that aspect. It was sort of almost like a split sort of personality and sort of things you sort of like, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I also enjoy solo birding more than group birding. That's probably because I'm quite introverted, and I do enjoy having the time alone because we're so busy in our, I also work full time, and we're always in constant connection with everything. That
plus, it's not just a choice of going by yourself and then going with a big group. There's also the choice of just going with, say, one other person.
Right.
So I've actually done that more often, in Cairns than I have to go with the big group. Do you know what I mean? So that's a bit more for me. That's probably a better situation because you can still focus on the things that you want to see.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've still got to accommodate with that other person in the things they like and where they want to go and stuff like that. So I think I think if you're doing it by yourself, there's a lot more freedom, with that, and it just comes down to sort of what I like, really, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I like. It doesn't mean I'm antisocial at all. It just means that's this particular topic and this particular passion. That's how I approach it, really.
And it must be given that it must be sometimes, I don't want to use the word annoying, but when you're on the Esplanade, which is one of the most birded places in the country, that you must get stopped, and people say hello and they want to know what you're doing, birders and non-birders alike.
Yeah.
how do you sort of regulate that internally, given that you like to spend the time alone, if that makes sense? Do you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean. And, really, in terms of the percentage of how much time I'm spending, looking through that camera lens at birds and how many people actually stop me to talk about stuff, that proportion is really low.
Right.
So, I don't really mind it. If I'm really concentrating and I'm videoing something, generally most people will not come up to you and go, hey, mate, what are you looking at? They can sort of sense that you're really concentrating on what you're doing. And it's when you take your eye away from the camera and you look, and then, a lot of people will then engage. And, the biggest proportion of people are actually other birders, because Cairns is a very, very popular destination. Most of the people who will stop you are other birders, so, and that's great, because then you'll meet people from different parts of Australia, different parts of the world. And, it's, when you and I went down the Esplanade, we met that lady from Switzerland, and that was just really interesting talking to her,
Yeah, that's
about
right.
the birds. Because I'm going to be going there soon, and I was like, oh, what am I going to see? It's like,
Yeah.
I want the juice on Switzerland.
Yeah.
Give me, what am I expecting to see? I'm going on a family holiday, but I still want to know, those times I'm traveling where what could I possibly see in the sky? So that was, it. I was engaged in that conversation 100%. It was just really interesting. I just felt as though you, I, and her could just, stood there and chatted for another 3 hours.
Yeah. I got a really bad sunburn that day on my neck because sun cream on. But it definitely does make sense though, because the world is so well connected and people travel everywhere now. After COVID, it's picking up again a little bit. I want to make sure we touch on every topic here, because it's interesting really to delve deep into these things. I've got here as a topic, and I sent you this: cycling to Martin Mere, 38 kilometers round trip. That's not nothing at all. That's not nothing. What drove you, and what still drives you psychologically? I love the psychology of birding. That's one of the most interesting things for me. The psychological drive that we have as birders. What is it that drives you psychologically to go birding?
Well, I think for that particular aspect of why I did go that far, basically just to watch birds, has to also come down to the family life I had. So we didn't have a huge amount of dispensable income, but my parents sort of made sure that and my father had a job where he was working a lot in the summer, but they basically made sure that we had this 1 week holiday to Wales every year. So and it wasn't very far, from where I grew up. We're talking, maybe 112 miles, it's like 150, 60 kilometers away. It's just not far. That for me is just like, a morning's drive, So, but as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, that was like going to the moon.
Yeah.
Because where I grew up is fairly flat, it's arable farming land. And in the distance, you could see, a couple of mountains that were, 300 feet high, so it was, just a bit. We could actually see the Lake District from South Ballyclare Day. So you could see in the distance, those mountains, and you could see Snowdonia, which is basically the mountains of North Wales. But driving through Snowdonia, to me, that was just the epitome of, wow, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
Used to get really, really excited by just, the wild landscape of it, really, So we'd have this fantastic holiday on the Llyn Peninsula, which is like this finger of land that sticks out on the west coast of North Wales. And, it was really sort of wild and remote. One of the islands, actually, which is near one of the beaches that we used to go to a lot, is actually Bear Grylls actually lives on the island, so it gives you some idea of, the landscape there and how appealing it is to people of the UK who want to get away from the towns and the cities. It was very appealing.
Yeah.
And so, during my, when I was getting to the age where, from the age of 5, we were just cycling everywhere, but the older you get, the more adventurous you get. And so I just wanted to go places. I just had this intense desire to travel from a very early age. So, and bound up with my love for birds as a teenager, I went to Martin Mere when it first opened. I think I was about 5 years old. And the place just captured my imagination almost immediately. Because, I remember we were, at the age of 5, that we were sitting in the classroom, and they were, they had taxidermied birds, and they were passing them around, and we got to have a really close look at them. And, so it was always somewhere that, was on the radar. Once I started really getting into birds, that's basically where I zoned in and headed to, because it was very well known. But I don't think it was. Just trying to think whether it was an RSPB reserve back then. I'm not too sure whether it was. It was owned by the Wildfire Trust or something like that, and it became RSPB a bit later. Someone might correct me on that as listening to the show. But anyway, now it's a full-blown RSPB reserve. And the thing that makes Martin Mere so famous is it's like a patchy network of sort of inland, freshwater sort of lakes, really. And back in the day, hundreds of years ago, I think the Dutch came over to the Lancashire, and they actually there was this. I think they aided in sort of creating an enormous inland lake there. So Martin Mere is basically the remnants of this enormous lake that used to exist, and so the thing that made it famous bird-wise is basically the huge migrations that you'd get in every autumn of wildfowl. So every September, as I was growing up, you would hear all the geese, flying overhead, rah, 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 rah. And you'd go out in the back garden or go out in the front garden, and you'd look up, and what you would see is, tens of thousands of geese, mostly pink-footed geese, and barnacle geese and grey-lag geese, Brent geese. You'd also get, swans, hooper swans, Buick swans.
Yeah.
Enormous, never-ending V shapes in the sky.
Yeah.
And that's just like, and now, the most I'll see is probably about 20 magpie geese in a V shape. It's like, we're, maybe exciting to some of the locals, but I'm like, just, go to Lancashire in September, and then you'll see, you'll see some, these massive endless V shapes of birds.
It's an event, isn't it? It's a natural phenomenon.
Massive event. And so that's when you'd go, right, I'm going to Martin Mere. They're all coming in now.
Yeah.
And I'd basically get up early in the morning, and with the sunlight in the UK, obviously it's dark, early, and it's especially as you get into the winter months, and it goes dark, 3:30, 4 o'clock. So I'd get on my bike in the pitch black, at the age of 13 or 14. And I think it was still dark by the time I got to Martin Mere, some days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and my parents just weren't fazed at all. Yeah, go on, see you later.
Brilliant.
Get out of the house, go for a ride in the country.
Yeah.
And I was only too willing to sort of, pack my bag up, pack lunch in there, and I'd spend the whole day there. And Martin Mere was just really well set up. I mean, there was heaps of hides there. So, there was a few double-storied hides. Just really well set up for birding, and I could just go there and just, I just didn't want to leave. Basically, it was just, I had a pair of binoculars. I didn't have a camera or anything like that. So, there wasn't a lot of young birders. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well,
I don't recall seeing young birders. So
I was going to say that actually back when I asked you the question about the lack of birders. Maybe that's what I meant is. In your age group and in your sort of generation, because, and it's changed a lot, I suppose, depending on where you're looking at. But you mentioned the magpie geese there, and comparing different places is a very interesting thing as well, isn't it? And I want to move on to that. So you did some work on the oil rigs, which is fascinating. And you were into geology, which it's very interesting because geology is a very it has
inanimate subject.
Well, I think it's. I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say it's got to do with deep time, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does.
And I love ideas like that. You know, think
Yeah.
when you go on the millions and billions of years back.
Yes,
I love thinking about all that, and maybe we could have a quick discussion about that, about sort of, because it's a science, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a science. Yeah,
and it's absolutely interesting to talk about the relationship maybe between. So why did you choose geology then, if you had a passion for birds?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Thomas. Yeah, I'm a bit polymathic, I think,
Yeah.
in the things I like. You know,
Yeah.
I like a bit of everything. And so I can have phases where I'm just focused on the one thing to the exclusion of a lot of other things, you know,
Yeah.
because I feel as though I can't do that thing justice unless I actually exclude everything else.
Yes.
So, and I think having an interest in, like I said before, you know, I was interested in facts, you know, and figures. I was a facts person, you know,
Yeah.
and that sort of generally tends to sort of, you know, push you in that direction of scientific facts. So, you know, as a teenager, I must have, there was a huge explosion in the 70s and 80s of popular science literature. And, you know, it just seemed like everybody, you know, was just bringing out a book on, you know, some subject in popular science. And so I basically just bought all of them, you know, I basically just every subject, you know, I just went through them. Every single popular science book that you could read about, you know,
wow.
I basically bought it, you know, so whether it was, you know, dealing with, you know, the natural world, or you know dealing with rocks or clouds or physics or astronomy or space, or anything. I mean, I just bought them all and just read them all, you know, in my teenage years, in my 20s.
Yeah.
And so you know, in terms of why geology, I think the key behind geology for me was, I suppose it relates back to, as a child, you know, going to the mountains and stuff like that and being super excited by that. You know, I found mountains just fascinating. And there was a documentary series in the UK when I was a kid. It was called Horizon. And they made some really fantastic documentaries. And they brought one out in, I think it was about 1981, 1982, maybe, somewhere around that. And it was all about Mount St. Helens.
Oh yeah,
the explosion at Mount St. Helens.
Yeah.
So here's me sitting down as, you know, 12 or 13, and this documentary was just mind blowing, and it blew my mind. You know, it just got me so excited about geological processes. I mean, every kid loves volcanoes, you know. So, you know, I had, you know, big, you know, picture books and, you know, books on, you know, volcanoes and all that sort of stuff. You know, it just really got me hooked into,
right,
you know, that, you know, really exciting part of geology, you know, volcanic activity, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think it just came out of that. And I love geography as well. My father was an artist, so I've got two brothers. I've got a brother who's a year older than me and a brother who's 10 years older than me. So Jonathan's the closest in age and Martin's 10 years older. And so we all grew up with this father who was very artistic. And so he's drawing all the time, every night, you know, in sketchbooks and stuff. And so, you know, as a child, you sort of copy up your parents.
Yeah.
So all three of us were drawing, you know, and all three of us were pretty good at drawing, because if you spend a lot of your time doing it, you know, you end up being pretty good. I mean, Jonathan's like a professional graphic designer now, you know, that's basically what he does for a living. And so I was very good as well at school. I mean, that was another thing I could have done. I could have actually gone to fine art school instead of going to university and doing geology. I had sort of this split decision, actually, you know, in my teenage years as to what I was going to do. And Jonathan was very good at art as well. So he actually went to Southport Art School. And so I just had this weird idea in my head that I didn't want to compete with him. And so I really liked geology, and I really liked geography, and I really liked cartography. And so I thought, no, I'll stay on I'll go to sixth form college and I'll stay on, and I won't go to art school. Because in Britain, you know, at the age of 16, you went to like a separate college for 2 years. It wasn't part of the same high school. So you'd go to this thing called a sixth form college, or a grammar school. Grammar schools were more down south. So in the north, there weren't many grammar schools. So the choice was a sixth form college for 2 years. So I just went on and sort of, you know, specialised in, did geography, and then I did geology as well.
Yeah.
And so from there, just, you know, went to, so I didn't have any massive plan at that age of, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I was never really, and I never have been career oriented.
Right.
And I think it goes back to this, what can I do sort of brain I've got, you know, which is not, I wouldn't say I'm brilliantly polymathic. I'd say I'm sort of completely averagely polymathic, you know, but I am interested in lots of different things.
Right.
You know, and sort of okay at lots of different things, you know. So not brilliant at different things, you know. I'm not you know, Swedenborg or anything like that. You know, don't put me in any sort of genius category of a polymath. I'm just not that at all. But I've just had that interest for a lot of different things, you know.
Right.
And you know, it was almost like a wave just went.
Yeah.
I just went and did geology, you know. And
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it at university because it was very practical. So you actually got out into the landscape a lot, you know. You know, which comes back to the Golden Eagle story, you know, which I don't know what stage you want to touch on.
Please do.
On that, so part of doing a geology degree, and well, an honours degree at least anyway, in the UK, a lot of science degrees are by default honours degrees.
Right.
And they're 3-year degrees. So you really cram it into the 3 years. I think if you go to Scotland, they were 4-year honours degrees, but in England, they were 3 years. And so your third year, you basically have to do a dissertation and you have to do a mapping project in geology. And so you basically have to, you know, pick where you're going to go and do the mapping project. And you usually go with one other person. So I went with my, you know, one of the guys I was mates with in geology, and we were sort of picking where we're going. So, oh, well, why don't we go to, you know, the wilds of Scotland, you know.
Yeah.
We had really sensible classmates who went to Spain, you know.
Right.
You know, apparently had a really nice time. You know, I'm not saying I didn't have a nice time in Scotland, but the weather's pretty inclement, you know.
Yes.
And so, you know, I spent 7 weeks in a tent in Glencoe Valley. So if your listeners don't know where Glencoe Valley is, I'm sure most of your listeners have watched Harry Potter, the movies.
Yeah.
So if you watch from, you know, the third movie onwards, where Hagrid's hut is, the background of the mountains, that's Glencoe Valley.
Wow.
Right? It's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
So it goes from almost sea level up to, you know, 4,500 feet. You know, those mountains, you know, in UK terms are fairly high.
Yeah.
Because you know, it's an old eroded block of land, the UK. So, you know, a lot of glaciation has sort of eroded the mountains down. So the highest mountain, Ben Nevis, you know, is only about 4,500 feet. You know, don't tell me what that is in meters, 1,000 something. I grew up with a brain, you know, working in feet. So you know, that's what I understand. So it rained a lot and it was really cold a lot, even though it was the middle of summer. And I just remember this one day, I'd walked to the top of this 3,000-foot ridge, you know, and I was mapping the geology. And, you know, there was no mobile phones in those days, you know, or anything like that. You know, if you fell down a scree slope and broke your neck, that was it. You wouldn't be found for like about 3 months, you know.
Yeah.
So it was just completely wild, you know. And so I'm coming down this 3,000-foot cliff or scree slope or whatever, you know, just there's nothing around. You know, there's a road that runs through the middle of the valley, so you can see cars occasionally in the distance, you know, driving past, you know, and all of a sudden this massive shape, I could just sense it, you know, it just goes whoosh over the top of my head, and I actually felt it. So the feathers of this bird must have touched my head. Absolutely scared the bejesus out of me, you know. I can't remember whether I fell over or whatever, you know, but I looked up, you know, and it was like, I mean, this bird is instantly recognizable because at the time I think they've introduced a big eagle from Norway into the UK now. I can't quite remember the name of it, but it's bigger than the golden eagle. But when I was in the UK, the golden eagle was it. That was the king of the birds,
Yeah.
Those sort of eagles. And
God.
when I look back at that, I mean, my heart was going, was something like anything, because, it scared the absolute bejesus out of me. And if you've watched documentaries, in the last 10 or 20 years, you'll see golden eagles, tend to sort of grab, goats off cliffs and just throw them off cliffs.
Yeah.
So I've got no doubt it was sort of it was scoping. It was scoping me out.
Wow.
So I could have been a Darwin Award winner, at the age of 20. Only no death for of a human from a golden eagle. That could have been me. A statistic.
Wow, what a story! What a story! And so that's the direct connection that you had with that eagle, because in the bio that you sent, you mentioned that you had a period of time where you weren't as much into birding.
It's not that I wasn't into it. It's just that I got into other things. So obviously, when you get a bit older, other things creep into your mind, Thomas.
Okay.
So you pursue other things and become obsessed with other things, and so it was, it wasn't just university life, because my university was on the outskirts of London. So I from my digs. Basically, which was about a mile from the actual campus. I was at the top of the hill, which is above Runnymede, where they see the sign, the Magna Carta, and I could see Windsor Castle, and I could see Heathrow Airport. I could see Concorde was just coming in every day. So that's where I did my degree, and that's just where my digs were. So it was a little bit of urbanisation. It was sort of the countryside, but I obviously. Still love birds, but I wasn't really. And if I saw a new bird, I'd tick it off in the book, But I don't remember I was necessarily, going out there and actually, birding deliberately, per se. It's if I went for a walk on by myself in the country, then I'd sort of, if it was on my own, then I'd say, there's a couple of rooks there, a few jackdaws carrying crows.
Yeah.
There's a jay. Where I grew up, you'd never see jays. So living down south, it was always lovely to see a jay because they're quite colourful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would take a mental note, but I was more focused on all that other stuff I was doing. And then, I've had basically, these 3 periods of my life were completely obsessed for quite a few years. Lean years where I'm not deliberately going out, and doing birding, but I am still birding, And then, the last few years where I'm sort of getting a bit obsessed with it again.
Right. Right.
So, but if I look back, I mean, I joined eBird in 2014, and I've always had pairs of binoculars. So, it's probably because I am really obsessed now. I'll probably think, I wasn't as obsessed. I wasn't as particular, let's say, about observing the behaviours, or and that's a factor of life, isn't it? It's a factor of the stages of your life. But interesting, when I look back, I'm thinking now, why didn't I do biology? Why didn't I? Because the advice I'm giving to kids is, well, what do you love and what do you find easy? Those are things you want to do. I mean, not saying I didn't love geology, and I'm not saying I found it easy, but I was attracted to it. Because if you like a subject, you're more willing to spend more time sort of studying it, and because you're really interested in it.
Right.
But at the moment, I'm thinking, why didn't I study biology and then specialize in ornithology? Because it's one of the things I'm sort of seriously been thinking about for about 2 or 3 years now. It's like, I'd like to, have a crack at, doing some postgraduate work. And, and obviously that's got to fit in with working, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
No,
and stuff like that.
It's interesting. It really is fascinating to look back, isn't it? And I suppose as you get older, you have more to look back on.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And time goes more quickly, and you've got less time to make decisions.
So at some point, you took the decision to move to Australia. Talk me through the reasons that happened, and then also branching out of that, how the birding compared with the UK.
Yeah, so it's some people may have a life that's sort of very linear, a linear trajectory of what the focus on what they want to do, and they do it, and the steps fall like dominoes. So I suppose my life wasn't like that at all. It's sort of, I got to the end of the geology degree, and I was like, at that point in my life, I'd sort of I'd achieved that, and I wasn't too keen at that stage on pursuing further study. I wanted to earn some money, basically. Now, with the geology degree, you got a couple of choices. You either go and work on an oil rig with an undergraduate degree, or you basically work on land, for a geotechnical company, something like that.
Wow.
So as you do out of uni, applied to lots of different companies, got a few interviews with a few, and got offered a job. First job I got offered, I just took. And it was about 3 months into the future when I could start this job, you see. So me being Mr. Super, want to have a big adventure, age of 21, because there's lots of things I did at university that were quite adventurous, but they were mainly in the UK. I was like, I want an experience in my life right now that is the complete opposite of what my life is. I want to go somewhere that's completely different, where the people are different, everything's completely different. So I had a little bit of an advantage there as well in where I was going to go, which is probably somewhere I would have picked anywhere. I was somewhere I would have picked probably anyway, but it was made a little bit easier by Martin, the eldest, my brother who's 10 years older than me, was actually living in Kenya.
Oh, yeah.
So he actually lived and worked in Kenya for 20 or 30 years. And so he had a flat in Mombasa on the Kenyan coast.
Wow.
During this period, he actually wasn't there. He was off in the Sudan because he's an anthropologist. So he's off doing some project somewhere in the Sudan, I think. So he wasn't there. So I was like, oh, great. I went to the bank and I said to the bank, can you loan me 1,500 quid? Because I want to go and backpack around Kenya for like 2 months. And here's the job that I've got, here's the offer of employment. And the bank went, yeah, sure, here's £1,500.
Wow.
And so basically I just hopped on a plane, went to Nairobi, and my goal was to climb Mount Kenya. So that was because Mount Kenya is bang on the equator, and I think it's the highest peak there is about 17,000 feet. So what's that? Is that 5,000? No, not quite. 4,500 meters, maybe somewhere on that. It's pretty high mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's got very unique flora and fauna, and it just really appealed to me. Because this mate that I went and did the Glencoe Valley with, he was basically telling me how he was going to climb Mont Blanc, the highest mountain in Europe.
Right.
So I was like, well, I know, this mountain's higher than Mont Blanc, I'll go there.
Yeah.
So that was another thing that drove me. So it was sort of a double whammy that appealed to me. And plus, Africa. I mean, this is going to be diametrically opposite to my existence, in the UK. And so I just had the most wonderful 2 months. So I went and climbed Point Lenana on Mount Kenya. The two highest peaks on Mount Kenya you need to be a really serious climber. They're almost vertical peaks. So the relatively easy one, is Point Lenana. And there's a glacier called, I think it's Lewis Glacier, right at the top. So you're on the equator, and the last 1,000 feet is you're climbing on this ridge next to a glacier to get to the top, mountain. And so I've got heaps of stories, I could tell you that came out of Africa. But I had a pair of binoculars, I saw what I could. I can't remember whether I had a guide with me. I don't even think I had a bird guide when I went there. I just had a rough guide, because I couldn't take a hell of a lot of stuff with me. But I've got this. Kenya's one of the best birding countries in the world. They've got a huge list.
Yeah.
My list is laughable. But I was, it wasn't a birding trip. It was sort of a backpacking trip. And I saw the Big Five, went to the Masai Mara. We'll get on to some of the other. You've got some questions about so like that, but spill the beans on. But
absolutely, yeah.
That was just. It was such a. We're getting on to why I came to Australia, and so I had that massive experience, and then I went and worked offshore. And basically, I got this phone call when I was doing the training in Aberdeen, and it was snowing, and this guy who was the operations manager said, we're flying you over to Southeast Asia. So there was like 15 guys on the course, and I got picked to go to Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow. Okay,
2 or 3 months.
Right.
So of those, 2 or 3 months in Southeast Asia, I think I worked on this rig in the South China Sea for about 2 weeks, and the rest of it, I didn't work. It was, I tried to work, they flew me back up to Hong Kong again, but the oil rig wasn't ready. So I ended up just having this, 2-week holiday in a 5-star hotel in China, which was a stone's throw from Hong Kong. So, spent a bit of time, quite a bit of time in Hong Kong as well. Well, back when it was, a British sort of colony, as it were. So when I got back to the UK after these experiences, I felt a bit flat. And just at that time as well, there was a massive recession. And I went to the North Sea, hated it, and I packed the job in with absolutely no plan whatsoever. I couldn't stand the job. And so I thought, I'll just pack it in. I'll go down to London. I had a mate down there, and I'll find a job down there. And at that age, you just don't think about things at all. You're bulletproof and you can do anything. But the world was in a massive recession. I mean, that was the recession that Paul Keating famously said, it's the recession we've got to have. Well, it wasn't just Australia, and Europe was experiencing, the whole world was experiencing it. And when recessions hit a place like the UK, it's not as resilient, I don't think, as somewhere like Australia.
Right. Why is that?
I'm not an economist, and I could probably have a few guesses. I think if you stand back and look at it, it's a small country comparatively with far more people, and so when you have even the smallest economic changes, they seem to have massive reverberations.
Right.
Across the whole island. So I mean, that's just really very simplistic, but that's just the way I looked at it. Because when I actually emigrated to Australia in 1992, Australia was still in recession. But to me, it just didn't feel like there was a recession here. That was just how I looked at it. Now, whether that was because I was just happy to be somewhere that was hot and warm, because really that was one of the raison d'etres, for sort of coming to Australia. But also it was just so big, and it was different, and it was exotic, and everything was new. I'd grown up in a country where everything was old. And so, that attracted me. I remember I showed up in Brisbane. It's like, wow, look at all these shiny skyscrapers. I was sort of attracted to all the newness and just the differences and the wildlife, and the birds and, the cockatoos and, parrots.
Incredible.
So I never looked back. I just basically stepped off that plane in Sydney, and that was it. I was like, I'm not going back.
Incredible. Wow.
Within 2 years, I got my citizenship. I thought, you're not deporting me for any reason,
Yeah.
I'm staying here.
Oh, incredible. Well, I'm still a permanent resident, and my wife, we're going to apply for the partner visa so she can be a permanent resident. They've made it more difficult now. But
it's look, if I'd spoken to you about this in 1992. It was basically, I think you had to meet 3 criteria. English, mother English. Is that you're fluent in that? Yeah, mother tongue. Yeah, bang, maximum points. Have you got a degree or have you got a trade? Yes, tick, full points. Have you worked for 6 months in the last 2 years related to that degree or related to that trade? Tick that box. Full points. 2 months later, here's your permanent residency. Off you go.
Amazing.
So I didn't even bother, getting a working visa. I thought, what's the point? Because I had to basically prove I had £2,000 in my account to get the working visa for 2 years. Whereas to actually get the permanent residency, I just had to, pay for the application, which was 160 quid at the time,
Wow.
and also pay for the medical, which was another like 100 quid. So it's like 260 quid. One-way ticket on Lauda Air to Sydney from London. Nicky Lauda, the racing driver, he owned that airline. I don't know whether it's still. I think is it still going? I don't know whether it's still going. So
and so to bring it back to the birds, did you see and have you seen? Now you've been here a few decades. What are the main differences that you see, and what makes Australian birding so fantastic?
Well, it's a huge country, so it's the 6th largest country in the world, isn't it? So you've got this range of climates.
Yeah.
If you look at like a climate map, Australia's one of these few countries because of its size that spans almost every single climate you can think of. Equatorial, tropical, subtropical, temperate, grassland, and desert. The UK is just basically temperate. There's a tiny bit of variation in that, but it is essentially temperate.
Right.
So you've got an astounding variety of habitats in Australia. It's unique wildlife and flora, that's been isolated because it's this massive island. So there's more birds. So if I look at my list for my local government area for, around South Point, Lancashire, my list was around about 110 species, something like that. And my list for Cairns, which I think the LGA is probably smaller, that's 242, and that's not including the tablelands, so that's just the lowlands. So
yeah,
and I'm not a mad lister, right? I'm not I've got to get every bird lister. That is not my motivation. So then you look at it's interesting to look at the resident versus vagrant populations of the two countries. So UK, there's 289 full species, 290 full species where you can say, every year you'll see these, they're either resident, some of these are winter visitors, 290. But the list in the UK is 580. It's actually double that.
It's mind-blowing.
Because 50% are vagrants.
Wow.
Like in terms of vagrants, it's, got this mind-blowing percentage. It's just heavily weighted, 50% vagrants.
Is it really that? Is it really that?
It is 50. It is. Yeah, I looked this up before the intro. I've got to get my facts right. Being a facts person.
Yeah.
And so Australia's got 898 species. That's including all the offshore islands and territories.
Yeah.
And of those, 165 vagrants. That's 18% vagrants.
Wow. Yeah.
So the weighting's a lot different.
Yeah.
So you think, well, what's the reason? What's the reason behind that? Well, it's probably a lot to do with the size, isn't it? You're talking about this country that's 32 times smaller. Australia's basically the size of Europe. So Europe's probably got slightly less than Australia. I don't know if I'm talking out of turn here, but it might have a similar amount. So that sort of gives you an idea of why there's a difference.
What I'd be interested in is if you were to take the exact shape and land area of the UK and superimpose it somewhere on Australia, how the numbers would compare. Do you see what I mean? So if you superimposed the UK onto Victoria, broadly speaking, I still think there would be more birds in Victoria, surely. If you got
probably. Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, because you've got the Mallee, you've got the different habitats, in the East Gippsland.
Yeah,
you've got you've got the coast. It's just there is a richness here.
There is, but I mean, even Victoria's larger than the UK. It must be
right.
I mean, if UK is 32 times, smaller than Australia, you'd think Victoria, even though Victoria looks small as a state.
Yeah. It looks.
It's probably still bigger.
Yeah. And I love looking at the social birding community because, it's so poorly populated, Australia, in a sense. You know what I mean? Like the density of the population is very low. And so I imagine, and if an Australian birder listening has gone to the UK and seen the difference, you just bump into more people necessarily because
absolutely, yeah,
and has that been your experience here in terms of the reverse of that? Have you found that there are less people who are into that sort of thing. Although I think the culture here is very orientated towards nature. You know, you have even the non-birders have quite a good knowledge of the local bird life. You know, the kookaburras, the sulphur-crested cockatoos, the rainbow lorikeets. So it's quite ingrained in the culture, I think.
It is, because a lot of birds in Australia are in your face.
Right.
I mean, they're really noisy, you know, and they're bright.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, everybody loves parrots, don't they? You know, so you know, everybody loves parrots because they're intelligent. You know, so we're attracted to that, I think, as well. And you know, cockatoos are just fantastic. I mean, when you know, if you go on YouTube and you look at some of these videos that people post where, you know, they feed the cockatoos on the balcony, and you look at all the comments, you know, from people in other countries, and they just can't believe it.
Yeah, right.
And it is, you know, it is incredible. And, you know, if you grow up here, you might not be as impressed by it.
Right.
But I'm still impressed by it. I just think that's amazing, you know, the fact that they trust you. I mean, you know, everybody must have a balcony story with an Australian parrot. You know, I remember when my parents, my brother Jonathan and his wife Melanie came to visit when I lived in Sydney. We lived in Manly, and so this was I'm just trying to think when this was mid-90s. And so we got them this fantastic unit overlooking the ocean, the harbour, Sydney Harbour, you know, in Manly.
Yeah.
And you know, they went onto the balcony. Like, I mean, the first day, there was like, you know, about 20 rainbow lorikeets on the balcony wanting to be fed, you know. And they just couldn't believe it. They were just like, you know, if this was the UK, these birds would be like 2 miles away. You know, it wouldn't be anywhere near them. You know, they'd be skittish and scared of you. And it's almost like, you know, because people feed them, obviously, as well, and they're sort of pinioned a little bit like that. But if you go to Manly in the evenings, you know, and where all the Norfolk pines are, there must be 1 million lorikeets roosting in. It's just the noisiest, you know, event ever.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
you know,
yeah,
you know, they must know that, you know, we don't harm them, you know, and therefore they can trust us to a degree. You know, we don't capture them, we don't harm them, you know, because they're pretty smart birds. And then cockatoos as well. I remember being in Early Beach and there was a pair just, you know, land on the balcony because people feed them,
right?
You know, so you know,
but I think there is an analog to that in the UK, though, in the bird feeding scene. You know, garden feeders.
Absolutely.
I used to love that. I lived in Scotland when as a kid, from 2000 and we're very similar. So far in my life, I've had we've been sort of everywhere. You know, so I lived in Scotland, I think, from about 2001 to 2009. And I used to love it was, you know, I got obsessed with the feeders and the different types of seeds you could feed them, the mixes, and all these amazing different types of feeders that you could buy at the RSPB stores. I used to love that. And that's not a thing here, really, is it?
It isn't. No, it isn't. And I suppose probably that relates to the availability of food as well, doesn't it? You know,
right?
I mean, I think in the winter months, obviously, it's a bit more difficult for these birds to sort of get sustenance as well. And so, I mean, we used to do it. You know, we used to have a bird tail. Like almost everybody's got a bird tail. Everybody feeds the birds.
Yeah.
You know, everybody chucks food into the back garden. You know, and my mum's cousin, his name's Ron. He still lives in Southport. He actually lived in London for a long time. He moved back to Southport, and he's got this fantastic, you know, bird feeder out the back. It's not just one, you know, it's got things dangling off trees and all sorts of stuff. And he actually backs onto botanic gardens. So he gets all the species that you get in botanic gardens.
Yeah.
And others to boot, you know. So he'll get red-legged partridges visiting, you know. So he's got bags of seed. I mean, he's got massive bags of seed, you know, he'll just throw out and feed the birds. And, you know, he gets all sorts of interesting stuff. You know, it's like sparrowhawks there and you know, nuthatches and, you know, all the, you know, the different species of tits you get there, you know, great tits and long-tailed tits and coal tits, all sorts of stuff, you know, that he gets because of the feeders, you know, they're attracted to that. So yeah, it is like you say, it's I'm not saying some Australians don't do that. I've got a bird table in the back, but I very rarely put stuff on it. because it's I have put stuff on it, but not a lot of stuff comes to it.
Right.
So I think, well, am I putting the wrong things out there, or they're just not interested?
Yeah.
They just don't need it.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said. It goes back to what you said about the availability of the food, because winter in Europe is everything's dead, isn't it? There's just nothing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
absolutely. I mean, they've obviously survived this long, over millions of years of evolution to actually eat stuff in the wild through the seasons, but because we as humans, feel that affinity to it, it's something that we can sort of attract to our urban space, I think, to make a little bit of country in the urban, and the birds are the one thing that will come.
Yeah.
And probably also things like foxes as well. I mean, foxes are really sort of rebounded a lot since they stopped fox hunting in the UK. So those are, fairly common in English gardens now as well. So
let's crack on. We've got lots of topics to cover.
You got a lot of editing to do, Thomas. Feel sorry for you, mate.
No. I
wish I hadn't picked Adrian.
It's been absolutely fabulous. And so now let's get on to what I think a lot of the listeners are excited to hear and to engage in is how do you find time and energy to bird as a parent and a spouse, and also managing your work time? I find I'm married, but I don't have kids yet, and I have a full-time job, and I have this podcast, which does take a chunk of my time too. So, and I'm already feeling like I don't have enough time to go birding, and so I'm really interested to hear. And you're a very competent birder, and so how do you manage to find the time to do that and to practice that skill and that constant field presence? How do you balance it?
Well, obviously, being a parent, like all my kids are basically, they're sort of almost born all at the same time. So, I had a 2-year-old, and then I had twin girls. So I've got 3 girls. And so, when I talk to people about that, they, a lot of people find that quite sort of, how did you cope? Because Renee, my wife's parent, family is all down in Wollongong.
Oh,
and obviously, my family was back in England, so we only had a network of friends, so that could sort of help us basically, with very young children, and both Renee and I are very independent people anyway, so we wouldn't want to burden people with it at all.
Right.
But so the early years of, yes, really, really lean, and the only sort of birding, you're going to do, when your kids are very small, and because they're not independent, you see, and you have to be watchful of them all the time. So the only sort of birding I did do was just basically when we'd all go out somewhere, we'd all go to a park,
right,
and that's when I'd noticed birds. Now, I suppose we'll get on, to the binocular camera thing as well a bit later as well, because I was just thinking about that in my head.
Yeah.
So now my eldest is 16 and the twins are 14. And I'd say probably, it goes on this sort of weird sort of, if you plot it on a graph, the amount of time I can go birding, and the age of the children, you'll find it's just going to go up like this. As the older they get on this chart, the more birding I'm doing, because the more independent they're getting, the more they get their own interests, and the more they can look after themselves.
Right.
And, so it's sort of gone up on that sort of, on a graph like that. So last few years, and this is why I've become I feel as though I'm sort of in that phase I was with all that freedom I had when I was a teenager. I feel as though that's sort of almost where I am now. I've got more time now. So the absolute priority is your children. That's number one, and also part of that is like, it's not just about you having kids. It's not a selfish, oh God, how am I going to get rid of the kids? You want the kids to come with you. If there's some good bird, I'd always suggest places to go that I knew there was going to be some good birds there. Hey, hey, Renee, well, why don't we go to this park? It looks really interesting. Kids would really enjoy this. Oh, what am I going to see there? No.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
sort of mix that in,
Yeah.
Renee's smart enough to know that, that that's, I'm thinking those things because, she obviously, I've always been into birds the whole time I've known her.
And how did you manage back when your kids were younger? How did you manage the eventual, maybe frustration's a bit of a strong word, but the frustration of not having the time? Did you struggle with
Yeah,
that?
well, you're coming from the perspective of someone who doesn't have kids, you see. And so I'll tell you this, there's a massive psychological shift in the way you think when you have a child. And you can read about it, you can see other people's kids, your relatives' kids. But until this thing actually happens to you, you'll have no understanding whatsoever. And so it's almost like there's two phases to your psychological life. If you're lucky enough to have children, there's before children and after children. And no
Wow.
matter how unselfish you think you are, and how giving you think you are, and how generous, and what a fantastic person you are, as soon as you have children, within those first 3 months, you suddenly realize how your perception of yourself was absolutely, completely wrong.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden, you're married, you've got a wife, and you have responsibilities for each other, but up until the point that you have a child, you're not actually ultimately responsible for someone else's life psychologically.
Right.
And it's almost like a switch that goes off in your head. So you're coming from the perspective of someone who's not experienced that yet, and so you are thinking these things. Oh, I'm not going to have time, and I'm not going to. Everything works out, Thomas. That's all I'd say. Don't worry about it. You'll find the time, and you'll really enjoy that time you're out in nature with your child. When you do see things, because you're not doing it 100% of the time. When you do see, when you walk down Palm Cove with your 5-year-old, and an osprey comes down and a fisherman throws a fish at the osprey, it's like, wow, did you see that? And the kid goes, gee, that was great, Daddy.
Yeah.
So it's a different way of looking at things, and it's just it's experiential. I can't explain it to you. You're just going to have to experience it for yourself. But when you do, tell me all about it.
I will. We'll do another podcast.
Have a look back at this podcast.
Yeah. In 5 years' time, yeah, definitely, or maybe 10. I don't know, but
so yeah, it's like absolutely, definitely, if you can have children.
Wow.
Because it's funny, I'll digress, and you might cut this bit out, but it's funny because Renee's the youngest and I'm the youngest in my family, and sort of, so our brothers and sisters, had children before us.
Okay.
And so, as a, young couple, you'd go and visit, them, and you go and visit them with their young children. And, it's almost like you have a capacity for being with other people's children for a limited amount of time because they're other people's kids.
Yes.
And they're not your children, so it's not that you don't enjoy it, but you'll do it, that you can then leave and go somewhere else and do something else. Whereas, when they're your kids, they're the most fantastic kids on the planet.
Have you thought about how to nurture the love, because you want your kids to what am I trying to get at?
You don't have to do it deliberately. You don't have to do it. You don't force those sort of things onto the kids.
Right.
You're a birder. You love birding. You love going outdoors. You'll still be doing those things, and you'll just take your kids along with you. Even if you're not specifically, going to tick off 100 birds in a national park, or whatever. You'll find the enjoyment, to pass that on to your children, and find those things that you think that might interest. Find that museum, that's got the taxidermy birds, or the dinosaurs and all that sort of stuff. All the things that kids love. So
yeah,
I haven't forced any of that on the kids at all. It's just. I think one of your guests, mentioned they just, they absorb it via osmosis.
Yeah.
They know that you're interested in that stuff. And so far, none of my kids are sort of, picking up binoculars and going birding with me. But I talk about it a lot. So they know a lot of the species. They know what things are, because when we're out, I'll go, oh, look at that, look at that, look at this. So they probably know more than most people,
Right.
even though they think they don't. They could probably name a lot of species, because I bore them to death with it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned naming species there, and so let's shift on to onto another topic that I was looking forward to discussing, is the binoculars, or maybe we should do what makes a good birder first.
The dreaded what makes a good birder question.
This is it. And I remember when we were at Katana Wetlands, we talked about this, that I was going to have you on the show, and what makes a good birder is you could actually dismantle the question and you break it down into smaller units. What do you mean by good?
Yeah, this is exactly right. And that's I did talk to you about this. It's like it's a very it doesn't appear to be a self-reflective question that is directed, at you. It appears to be objectively who's a good birder. Tell me objective. Is it that person who knows all the species and knows all the scientific names and knows, how many flight feathers are on this bird and that bird and knows all the migratory movements and da 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 da. And I suppose a lot of guests, a lot of people you have on would tend towards that sort of an answer.
Yeah.
But I think this question basically says more about you than it does, about whether a person is a good birder or not. Because it's an entirely subjective question. It's not objective at all. It has no objective reality about whether someone is a good birder. And I like to say it's what I call a Pelagic question. So basically, and I just spoke to you about this before. One of my favorite books and one of my favorite authors is a guy called Robert Persick, who was this like a child genius, and he wrote this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and he basically grapples with this question in this whole book: what is good? How can you define good? So good can be quality, good is love, and it's essentially not definable. You know what it is, but at the end of the day, you cannot define what it is, because it's a reflection of what you are. Right. So really, you could also ask me, what do I like in a birder?
Yeah.
What do I like in a birder? Because essentially the question that you're answering is what do you like in yourself? Really.
Yes.
Really, it sounds like we're going off topic.
I don't think so. I think we're going so deep into the topic that it's, we're really unboxing it all, which is fascinating to do. It hasn't happened really yet on the show that we go down philosophically and psychologically and down into the details, as it were. But so
I find the question very difficult to answer from a traditional perspective, because you're basically thinking about, people who define themselves as birders and put their hand up and say, I'm a birder. So,
right.
So who's the good birders out of those people who say, yeah, I'm a birder,
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily that, is it really either? I mean, you could have someone who sits on the porch every day, and looks at the back garden, and they get a willy wagtail in the back garden or a magpie lark, and they just watch them all day. I can tell you that person probably knows more than you know about the behaviour of a willy wagtail or a magpie lark. Who's not to say that they're not a good birder, because they know, you might know, be able to identify 200 species in your local area. This person can only identify 5, but they know far more than you do about the behaviour of a willy wagtail or a magpie lark.
Yes.
They could talk to you till the cows come home about what this bird does. What times of the day it feeds, when it sings its song, and I can tell you the willy wagtails, they're singing songs all times of the night, because my children tell me, because they're, they hear the willy wagtail all night. It's sing it again, Dad. So there's that part of it as well. Is it? So what do I like in a birder? Enthusiasm, really. You're enthusiastic about the subject. You don't have to be madly passionate about it, but are you enthusiastic about it? I like people who are enthusiastic, about it. And generally, everybody who identifies as a birder, they're generally I haven't met many morose birders.
Yeah.
They're like, oh God, there's a bot. Oh God, oh, it's boring. Most of them are pretty sort of upbeat and sort of, because they're interested in subjects.
That's right. Yeah.
You bump into any of them, and they're all going to tell you a story.
Mm.
They've all got the stories. They're all enthusiastic. They're all itching to tell you the story.
Yeah.
Oh, the bird I saw the other day. Let me tell you this. So enthusiasm, desire to learn. That's another thing I like to see in people. That I want to learn about stuff. I mean, I spend a lot of time down the Esplanade, and it's probably one of the places I'm most comfortable. I really don't think I'm an expert at all. I just spend a lot of time down there, so I do just probably notice things just simply because of that, just because of the amount of time I'm spending down there. So I do bump into a lot of people who. It's funny how you get different sort of groups of birders, like the ones who live in the forest, they'll come down to the Esplanade every now and again. And, oh God, I'm hopeless on Esplanade birds. I don't
right.
know, and it's like, they're not hopeless. They're just not down there a lot, They feel the same way down the Esplanade that I feel when I go to the Atherton Tablelands. I don't feel as though I'm not a novice. I'm not, I don't know what things are. I'm not at the level that I'd like to be because I'm not there all the time, and I suppose they, the people who come down to the Esplanade feel that way as well, because you'll also get comments about how, they all look the same. They're all pretty drab. They all look the same.
Right.
But so I love talking to those people. Because I have this conversation with them every time,
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just the thing, isn't it? It's the more you look, the more you find.
That's right. Well, this is something I wanted to say on today is, I've never really been that into shorebirds. For some reason. I don't know why. I've always been more drawn to closed habitats, the mallee or the rainforest or eucalypt woodlands, quite compact, closed environments, and the sounds. I really enjoy the sounds and the smaller birds in some sense. But I've got to say, and that's part of the joy of birding and meeting other birders is that it opens your eyes to other aspects of birding. For me, it was that Asian dowitcher. And I live so close to the Esplanade. I just thought, it's a shorebird, but why not? No, and that's super rare. So I was really excited to go. And
you were. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. Carry on.
And going to the ephemeral swamp that the Ruff has been hanging out at. Those, I probably spent more time looking at the sharp-tailed sandpipers than the Ruff. They're beautiful.
Absolutely.
They're beautiful.
So do I. I mean, they are just fantastic.
Yeah.
There's so many of them.
It's amazing.
I mean, I was down the Esplanade at lunchtime today, and there was probably about 60 or 70 sharp-tailed sandpipers. I couldn't see a juvenile. Which I thought was really interesting.
Okay, right.
So, and I'm going to have to maybe do a bit of research on that. But yeah, they're all down at the swamp, aren't they?
Right.
And they're just the colours just popping out.
Oh,
amazing. And when we were there late, one of them turned blue. I couldn't believe it.
It just switched on, the light.
I was like, geez, yeah. Gee, this thing looks as though it's got blue feathers. I couldn't get over it.
That's right. And some of the other things that we touched on, actually, I think it was that birding session that we were at is the binoculars and camera dilemma, isn't it? And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've mostly is it in the last maybe 10 years that you've only had a camera?
Yeah, I was just trying to think how long it is. It's at least 10 years. It's at least 10 years. So I've had my current camera, which is a Nikon P1000. For probably 2-3 years, maybe. Yeah. 2-3 years, maybe 3 years. And before that, I had an Olympus that had a dot sight on it. So that was a bridge camera as well, with, I think it has 60 times optical zoom. So the Nikon's got a 125 optical zoom, which is equivalent to 3000 millimeters. Which, for people who know cameras, 3000 mils just sounds like stupid. And it is stupid, but it's the reason why I wanted to buy that camera. But it is because for me it was an upgrade for having this Olympus for 7 years. So the main reason I got that Olympus is the whole what was that? You know, it's like, nah, it's gone. You know, and I just was very frustrated with that experience. And I love photography anyway, you know, and so the first opportunity, I had, I've got to get something that I can actually record. You know, I did actually have, so it wasn't just I had a pair of binoculars. Before that, when Renee and I went overseas in 1999, we did a 6-month trip in 1999. We've done a few 6-month trips. We were sort of like getting away for a bit, and I bought at the time, which was the world's smallest video camera. So it was a Panasonic that you could put in the palm of your hand back in 1999, and it's had a 60 times zoom. So one of the things that really attracted me about getting that, you know, was dual purpose. Yeah, we're going to have this video really portable as well, because back in 1999, everybody else had a big bag, you know, and they'd unzip it. You know, there'd be this, you know, it was like they were doing a BBC documentary, you know,
right,
they just have this massive camera. I remember being in Thailand on a boat going to Phi, you know, and this guy, you know, in his singlet, you know, just looked like he'd been weightlifting. He just gets this big camera on his shoulder, you know, and he's sort of walking around the boat. You know, I just got this little camera out, you know, and
yeah.
The smaller the better, you know. He took one look at it, you know, you just see the jealousy, you know, just in his face, you know. So I used that video camera for birding as well. So I've got a lot of, you know, birding footage, you know, from that camera from 1999, from places we went around the world, and 2003. And so, you know, I was able to just go back and see what species I'd seen. So
right.
Tick them off my world list.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that sort of attracted me, that zoom as far as you can to see something. You know, it's like, even with a powerful pair of binoculars compared to a powerful zoom camera, it's still mystery, you know, some of it. And plus you can record it and go back later and look at it and study it, you know. And if you really like studying things, you need a camera, you need to take the photos, you need to take the video. So that's what really appealed to me. So during that phase, I still have binoculars, but then I thought, no, I'm going to get myself a dedicated camera that's got some good burst photography. So that 60 times camera, that Olympus, you know, had the dot sight, so I could just flip this thing up, you know, and look through. It was built in, and I could basically, instead of looking at the LCD screen at 60 times zoom, you know, I could basically track something just with the dot sight.
Yeah,
you know, which is hell of a lot easier than looking at an LCD screen. You're going to lose it, you know. So I got so many IDs with that camera, but on that dot sight, that I wouldn't have had a clue what it was if I didn't do some burst photography with the dot sight, and then I could go back and study the photographs and go, holy, you know, that was a da-da-da-da, you know, I can tick that one off.
So it's identifying after the fact, isn't it?
Identifying after the fact, and there's no rules in this game, Thomas. I don't care what people think. That to me was exciting.
Right.
You know, because at the end of the day, how's that any different, you know, from, you know, someone shooting a bird and sending it back to someone in England, you know, 19th century England, and then categorizing it and classifying it.
Right,
you know,
right.
Like at least you're not killing it, you know, but you're able to sort of identify it and classify it, and then spend some time looking at it, you know. And so I love that aspect of it. So as soon as I saw this Nikon P1000 on the market with this 125, I'm like, I'm going to get that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get that. And, you know, I think it'd been on the market for about, you know, 9 months or so before I actually bought it. And I love the fact that I can ID things at ridiculous distances with that camera. It is just, it's funny the amount of times I've been down the Esplanade and someone's had a scope, you know, on a tripod, and they've seen me with the camera, and they've said to me, oh, have a look at the bird through the scope. And I'm like, why? I don't need to. You know, what's your scope? You know, 600 mils? Yeah, I'm like, I'm going out to 3,000. I'm like, I can push it out digitally to 12,000 mils and still ID stuff. You know, you look at the navigational posts out in in the sea lane, you know, I can ID the turns on those posts. You know,
On the
12,
really on the ones that are way out. That's incredible.
some of I can. Well, certainly the closest ones.
Yeah.
And you know, if you know the behaviour, you know, and you can just pinpoint, you know, the yellow bill or the crest, you know, you can sort of, or you know, a booby's probably fairly easy to ID. Oh, for sure, you know.
Incredible.
And if you just look at it with your naked eye, you're like, you can't see anything.
Yeah, or with binoculars, or you know.
You can't. So yes, I absolutely love that camera. It's got its failings. I wouldn't say failings. It's designed for a purpose. And if you want to ID things at ridiculous distances, then get the camera, because that's I didn't get the camera to take brilliant photos that I'm going to have in a magazine.
Right.
I'm not saying that you can't do that with this camera. You know, you can take some very good photographs with it, but it certainly isn't, you know, a DSLR camera, you know, at all. But I think it's brilliant. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the next iteration.
Yeah.
So the burst photography, you know, I'm hoping in the next iteration, the burst photography is good. You know, the autofocus for that is better, because that's something that's not, you know, super. If I go and bird in the forest with it, because most of the time I'm birding down Esplanade, I'm birding where I can see for miles.
Right.
You know, I have to use the manual focus. Well, I use the manual focus a lot down the Esplanade simply because of the brightness, and it can't focus very well because of the shimmer. But early in the morning is good. But I'll use the manual focus a lot in the forest. And you know, when I looked at your, you know, you showed me your monarch binoculars at the week, I thought, gee, that's tempting, because they were really good.
Well, that was my next question. Is the tide turning? Are you gonna, you know, because the thing with binoculars and telescopes is that nothing's being recorded, but somehow that makes the moment precious, doesn't it?
I've had this conversation with another friend of mine, a birder, who sort of, you know, who I wouldn't say looks down on the fact that I use a camera, you know, but I think maybe there's a camp of birders who refer to themselves as purists.
Right.
You know, maybe the purists would maybe look down, you know, at someone like myself who uses a camera.
And what would their reasons be?
Know.
What would their reasons be to look down on that?
Historical, maybe. This is the way it's always been. You know, if you're a birder, you have a pair of binoculars, you have a scope, you know, you have your khaki green pants, you know, your khaki green, you know, top, you know, with lots of pockets in it, you know, your birding hat, you know, that's it.
Right,
you're
right.
a birder, and this is, you know, the box that you've got to fit into. I don't know. I'm jesting, obviously, because everybody's different. I did. I have been seriously thinking. I've been thinking actually seriously for a while now to actually get a good pair of binoculars. But also they're not cheap things, are they? You know, I mean, it's sort of balancing the budget out with everything you're going to buy. You know, I have got 3 kids, a mortgage, 2 cars. I want to go on holidays, and you know, there's all those other sort of factors. So you got to, you know, if I go and spend, you know, couple of grand on something, then you know it's only fair if, you know, Renee goes and spends a couple of grand on something, isn't it? You know, so you only got those things as well.
That's right.
But look, I probably will buy a pair because I was very, very impressed with those monarchs. I at this stage in my life, I probably wouldn't buy Swarovskis. Swarovskis are just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's incredible, you know. And whenever
the clarity's phenomenal.
It's
and but you know, those monarchs I thought were just I mean, that is the pair you've got is exactly the pair I've been looking at for about 6 months.
Right.
And I was so happy I got to look through them, because they're just brilliant. And this is the thing about cameras. It's like, why can't someone design a camera that's got binocular vision? You know, I mean, you can buy binocular cameras, but you know, they're not very good. You know, they just haven't. I don't know whether it's they just haven't. There's not the demand for it, so they haven't made a really good one. I really don't know. But the problem is, you're looking through one eye through a viewfinder on a camera.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, and so you can get fatigue doing that. And when you've got glasses as well, you know, you got the glasses pressed up against the viewfinder. Although I can take the glasses off, you know, which I do sometimes, and just change the focusing on the viewfinder. No, I don't think it's an either or sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
a lot of birders most birders who you would say are serious birders have got the binoculars, but they've also got the camera with the the 600mm lens, or the 400mm lens.
Yeah, and the classic question I also ask on the show is if you, instinctively, whenever you see something coming in or perching from out of nowhere, do you first reach for the camera or do you first reach for your binoculars? Because that's
I don't have binoculars, so it's the camera.
Yeah.
But this is it, and only time would tell actually if I did get a pair of binoculars what I would do. Because there's always that one of the reasons I got a camera was there was always that risk, I suppose, you're going to miss something really important.
Yeah. The fear of not being able to document something or prove it. I feel that a lot.
And if you're into ID, that's critical, I think, and having a record of it. So I'm probably just still going to heavily preference the camera. And so whatever failings this camera's got, I'm gladly putting up with them, because the pluses for me, the pros for me, for what I love doing as a birder, far outweigh the negatives.
Right.
Even though I looked through your binoculars and went, gee, these are bloody good. Wow.
Right.
If only my camera had,
had that quality,
the binocular, stuff, and they did something funky with the digital thing to trick your eyes and make you think it's a binocular view of something.
That's right.
Anything like that. I'm sure they could do something. At least if you're looking through two lenses, two viewfinders.
It's just so full that the vision, your whole brain is looking through them, and the field of view is so big. And for any listeners who are wondering, I have the 10x42 Nikon Monarchs M7s. And they were $849, which I thought about getting a camera. I really did. I thought, you know what? I don't know, what should I get? But I eventually came down on the side of the horse of the binoculars, because that's...
Yeah.
I really do get a lot of joy at just looking.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, it would be an absolute joy with those binoculars. And if you don't feel the pressure to record or to get a record, like I could say go down the swamp, get photographs, video of the Ruff, some of the birds, and then look through the binoculars and just to see if there is anything else there that I'd sort of missed.
Right.
Because obviously even at the same zoom level as you get on the binoculars, because you don't have the clarity, you might miss something, that you'll pick up with the binoculars. But then there's always danger it's going to fly away, you're going to miss it, and you didn't get a picture of it. And it's just this constant, constant struggle, isn't it? It's like I look through your binoculars and I'm like, how hard is it to put a CCD chip in this thing? Turn it into a camera and a 4K video, recorder. I don't. It must be difficult. Otherwise, they would have done it by now, wouldn't they?
And I think one of the pressures that you mentioned before about having the camera and going for the shot is eBird, isn't it? Because if you see a ridiculous rarity, the moderators really are going to want to see a photo of it.
Absolutely. Now they are. Yeah. Back in the day, probably not so much. If you could basically write a whole paragraph in eBird about exactly what you saw, the plumage, the behavior, about, even if you'd seen it somewhere before in a different country, and it was a vagrant here and not there, I've got lots of experience and da-da-da. Yeah, I mean, I've got no doubt that they'd accept it. But, because I don't know exactly, what are the moderators looking at? Are they more inclined to accept if they know who's? I really don't know. I haven't got a clue.
Reputation, you mean?
But I find lately that if pretty soon after I put a photograph up on there, it comes up with the confirmed very quickly. Whereas if I don't put the photo on, the confirmed isn't up there. So I'm just wondering whether there is, there's a factor in there. I really don't know, because I haven't, spoken I do know one of the moderators, but I haven't really spoken to them about the technical aspects of what they do in that regard. Which I tell you what, would be an interesting person to have on Birding Today is an eBird moderator. I don't know whether you've done that already.
I've done one with Kim Farley, who's a reviewer for the ACT, but it's different.
You
different
probably
place.
didn't ask them, the specific questions all about it.
The steps, yeah.
Yeah, the steps, and that will be very interesting for us as birders who are actually, logging. I did hear a rumor. I don't know whether you told me that they don't like. A lot of people will put something like, seen previously, or there's a comment.
Yeah, continuing bird.
Continuing birds,
yeah.
And then nothing else. It's like, oh, come on, throw me a bone for God's sake, I'm not continuing bird.
But it's all those little things, isn't it? It's really interesting.
This is it.
Do you have time to talk about the Nordmann's Greenshank discovery?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Because that was huge. That was massive. So, leaping off the photography conversation we just had, is that how you came to find it?
How I came to find it? Well, no, it would have been the same looking at it through a pair of binoculars. It was just that I was able to just start recording it immediately because I knew it was different. You see.
Yeah.
So I think I'd had that camera for I'd had it for about a year actually, because I did the Nordmanns on the 1st of January. It's early in the morning. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day. I mean, the best New Year's Day ever.
Wow.
The best New Year's Day bird, in history. Because a lot of birders will do a New Year's Day list, won't they? They want to start off with a bang, So I'd actually, for the week leading up to that, I think we'd been on the tablelands. So I think we'd stayed somewhere, we'd been camping. I don't know where it was, but I wasn't actually down on the Esplanade. That was like my first chance when we got back on New Year's Eve for me to go to the Esplanade. And, my days of, going to a big New Year's Eve party, with younger kids, just they're way in the past, And it's funny, Renee and I joke about this, even when there was just us before kids, we could never get to past 11 o'clock. We were just like, even as 20-year-olds, we'd just, we'd go down to the beach, in Sydney to watch the fireworks, and we'd by 10:30, we were off to bed, we were just knackered.
Yeah.
So just, we were just hopeless at staying up, so... it doesn't really bother me that much about that. And with kids, there's a 9 o'clock fireworks. So that's the fireworks you go to if you, for me, it would be Palm Cove, those would be the nearest. You'd go and do the 9 o'clock fireworks, be home in bed at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
So I got up New Year's Day on the 1st of Jan 2021. I was like, I'll go down the Esplanade too, because I hadn't been down there for a little bit because I've been on this little trip. And I started at I was going to do go the whole length, do a nice list.
Yeah.
So I started at the south end near where the lagoon is.
Right. And
the tide was coming in. That's right. Actually, it didn't have, the tide was fully in by 7:30. So I got there pretty early, maybe about 6:30, something like that. And there wasn't much, so there's a few pelicans, Wimbrel, Otto Godwit, there wasn't a lot. So I walked to the next platform north of that, from where the lagoon is. And I saw some birds probably about 50 to 100 meters out that I couldn't make out with the naked eye. There's probably some tattlers there, and probably some Godwits.
Yeah.
And so I basically just, put the P1000 on it and just zoomed in. And it's that immediate, goosebumps.
Yeah.
I don't recognize this bird.
Wow.
And I've talked about this with, on other podcasts and stuff. And it was like, it's like, a few choice words in the head, and I don't know what this bird is. And that, bang, your heart's going, dun, 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 dun. The adrenaline's going, and then I'm saying within 4 seconds, I was recording in 4K. I didn't even bother with a picture. I was like, press the record button, because I needed time to think about because I thought this bird could fly away almost immediately.
Yeah.
And then that would be it. And I know this is different. I know I've never seen this bird before. And I've never seen this bird on the Esplanade. I did not recognize the bird. And the very first ID cue that went to my head was the bill, how thick the bill was. Because, and I've said this before, I didn't even think Greenshank. Greenshank didn't even pop into my head. So it was an overcast day. So on the Esplanade, obviously the sun rises, and so across the water. So, even though it was cloudy, that's where most of the light's coming.
Right.
So you're sort of you're not looking at a completely silhouetted bird, but you're looking at a bird on a cloudy day that's really sort of quite dull. So one of the classic IDs of the Nordmann Greenshank is the bicoloured bill, the yellow half and sort of the darker half at the bottom end of it. So all I could see was two tones. I couldn't even make out that it was yellow, and it was the thickness of the bill. There was like a white eye ring, and it was sort of, the body was about the size of a great knot. And I'm recording, and then it gave a one note call, lifted the wings up. I got it all on video within the first 5 minutes.
And that's the amazing thing with video, isn't it? Video, I love video because you get thousands of frames that you can choose from.
Oh, absolutely, and it's all 4K on the Nikon P1000. I've got it permanently set to 4K.
Right.
So you got the highest quality, and you can take any of those frames, if it's steady, and it can look like a very, very good photograph. So then I'm like, I didn't really see the upturn in the bill either. I know that people who've seen Nordmann's Green, if I'd have seen this bird in Asia, I would have known the ID straight away. But obviously being a birder for so long and having, I've got about 5 or 6 Australian field guides. So, as a birder, you just spend half your time just flicking through the book, don't you? I mean, you're always dreaming about vagrants and really rare birds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so those sort of, even though you've not seen them, they're somewhere in the compartments of your mind. You've got some idea about a name and some idea of what something looks like. Very, very vague idea it might be, if it's something, that you're not expecting to see at all.
Yeah.
But if you've been birding for long enough and you've got a few field guides, it's sitting there somewhere. So I'm like, what is it? What is this bird? What is this bird? And then I was just super lucky. There was, a common Greenshank just stood right next to it. And then that was a complete light bulb. It was like, holy crap, this is a Greenshank. From not having any reference points to suddenly having the reference point.
Yes.
To suddenly go, this is a Greenshank, because then you can see the family resemblance. But it's not a common Greenshank. You've seen enough of them to know, well, this isn't a common Greenshank.
Right.
But it is a Greenshank. I can see there's a slight upturn in the bill. Yeah, I can see that. It's a little bit stockier, it's a little bit shorter. I can see, there's a bit of yellow in that bill at the base. Greenshank. And then I'm going, Greenshank. What Greenshank species are they? I got my phone. The bird's still there. I'm still photographing of, I'm like through the phone. Are there any birders here? There was nobody. There was just no. I mean, this was like earlier. Everybody's in bed, with a hangover. Only silly people like me are out birding, But there wasn't anybody near, and what is? I'm looking on my phone. Greenshank, and Nordmann's Greenshank popped into my head, but I didn't really know what it looked like, because I was trying to think of other species of Greenshank, I said, oh, no, the Nordmanns. Let's check the Nordmanns on the phone. What does that look like? Bang. First picture I got to, identical.
Wow.
And I'm like, this can't be a Nord. This can't be. And then you start doubting yourself. This can't be a Nordmann's Greenshank. Surely. I didn't even know at that stage it had never been seen in Queensland, let alone the east coast of Australia. It had never been seen. I knew it was a vagrant, so it must have been seen somewhere in Australia. So I'd have found all that stuff after the effect. So, but I was like, this is it. This is an Nordmann's Greenshank.
Wow.
I've been birding for long enough down here to sort of, this must be it. But you still doubt yourself. You're still dubious. So continue to take video, photograph. I've got that classic picture on my Facebook page now, which is just the common and the Nordmann standing next to it. It's a dull photograph, but it's just a brilliant. If you can basically have a vagrant and the bird that it's most closely related to is standing next to it. You're
Yeah.
just, all the looks sort of landed on you at one point in time. So I felt incredibly lucky. And I basically put it on eBird and saved it at that point as a Nordmann Greenshank. And
did you submit the list immediately, or did you save the list and submit it later?
I'm trying to think exactly what I did, because I did on that same list, I did have some rose-crowned doves. So I actually went down to the north end and birded for a bit down at the north end, not for a long period. I think I drove down there, just had a quick bird down there, but I was so excited to get home. I was like, I better get home and upload the photos. So I've actually put this in. I actually put two things in the list. The first one was, shorebird looks like a Nordmann's Greenshank. I just need to download my photos. Oh. And the second one was Nordmann's Greenshank. So I actually put two in there. Just put a few descriptions. Looks exactly like a Nordmann's Greenshank. Now, I don't think at that stage I had the bird's eye program, so which sort of alerts, immediately to people who are hooked into eBird. They can see, the birds come up straight away. So I think by the time I got home, the Twitcher Facebook page was already alight with the fact that some bloke in Cairns, had seen a Nordmann's Greenshank. I didn't even know, because I wasn't even a member of that page, because I was sort of more, soloing really. I'd done the Michaelmas Cay trip and a couple of things, but I really didn't know many people.
Right. And that was my next question: the reaction, the national reaction. How did it occur? How did people start contacting you, or was it a big thing, or?
Yeah, well, obviously I put the photos on, and it's pretty funny to read some of the comments on the Twitch's page, because it's like everybody just wanted to get on the plane, and this is like in the middle of COVID as well. There were some people couldn't travel.
Of course,
I don't think Victorians could travel. So not until they could towards the. Luckily, it stayed for a long time, because I think towards the end of that period, because it stayed till the 9th of May on that first visit. And so the reaction was just incredible, and I was just as you can imagine, just incredibly happy, having been a birder my whole life, and I've seen rare birds, but to actually be the person who actually IDs it, and actually puts it out there for the first time was just a tremendous honor, really. It's just a fantastic feeling, and to get to share it with everybody. So, that is basically the first thing I did was I was a member of the Cairns Birders emailing list.
Yeah.
So I emailed the editor of the local newsletter, and there's probably about 80 or 100 birders on the list. And I said, look, I think I've got Nordmann's Greenshank. Everybody's got to get down to the Esplanade at 3:00 this afternoon.
Wow.
On the outgoing tide.
Yeah.
And then I've put my photos up there, and then I was like, nobody's, I was a bit impatient. Obviously it's New Year's Day, so I'm probably still in bed, So then I get the whole list, and I emailed everybody myself. I basically, look, I better just email everybody. So I just emailed everybody, put some photos in there. I was like, look, there's Nordmann's Greenshank, I think down here, but you better get out there. Because I'd actually as well, even though I'm like, it can't be anything else, I just put it on eBird, the Australian Bird ID page.
Right.
About 6 photos, casually, just Nordmann's Greenshank. It's sort of knowing the answer is going to be yes, there's nothing else it could be, So, and actually the first person who came back and said, yeah, that's Nordmann's Greenshank was Adrian Boyle. So Adrian Boyle, I think, is the first person who had the first record in the early 2000s of a Nordmann's Greenshank on 80 Mile Beach. And subsequently, I think there's 5 records accepted prior to the one in Cairns. And they were all from 80 Mile Beach, all from those people from the Broome Observatory who do counts there. But apparently that one was very, very hard to see, because they get thousands of birds there. So you basically, got a massive scope and sort of have to go through a lot of birds, which I wouldn't have been able to ID it, at that time, but luckily having seen the bird and sort of, I think I saw it about 76 times. So I videoed it. I was just looking at it all the time. I was down the Esplanade as much as I could be, and I had a bit more freedom because the kids were a bit older. So, if I could, the tide was good, I'd go before work, I'd go after work, I would go during my lunchtime sometimes. I would go at the weekends as much as I could, and I just became the contact person. I became the point man. Everybody was messaging me, and because I was looking at it all the time, I could find it very quickly, you see. So I got to this point where I could basically ID it at a stupid distance. I just knew exactly what to look for. Big white blob running around like a pteric. Yeah, that's it. It could this, but I've actually ID'd it probably about 1 kilometre away using the Nikon P1000. I just got to that point where I'd just been watching it for so much and so long and just knew its behaviour intimately. And I got a tremendous amount of joy from that, that I got to that point with that bird.
Right.
And
right.
Most, it was just so fantastic to sort of meet all these birders and sort of, show them the bird. And, there was obviously a lot of people, didn't need my help. A lot of people had seen it in Asia. And it wasn't, on an incoming tide, it was just so accessible. I mean, if you know where Muddy's is, I mean, the first year it was here, that high tide area in front of the cafe, you could sit down and have a cappuccino and get a really good photo of the Nordmann's Greenshank.
Brilliant, yeah.
It was just the most accessible bird. Although in that first year, I must say, it was probably only there probably about 8 to 10 times. And then we found out we did a Queensland Wader study group count at Casuarina Point, and we found it out there. So we knew it was, roosting out there probably at night as well, just on the mouth of the Barron River.
Amazing.
So that was good. That was good to know as well.
Right.
But it really is, I recommend, finding a mega, rare bird for everybody.
Yeah.
It's really, it was a magical experience. And, I've got so many birding sort of colleagues and friends now, that I've met through that.
Yeah.
And it also forced me to step up my game. I'm not saying I wasn't I wasn't saying I wasn't a very good birder before. I was obviously, been birding for a long time, but it's sort of having that much exposure, it sort of forces you to go, look, I better get a bit more serious about this, and a bit more obsessive about it, and a bit more, because I'd like to know a lot about particular things. I don't like to not know about things, and
right.
and that's something to do, I suppose, with science as well. You like to collect as much data as you get to form the best opinion, the best hypothesis about things that you possibly can. But still have humility, etc. But it's been very enjoyable, sort of that process. And it's one of those things. It's a double-edged sword. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And that's true with life as well. The more that you actually do learn, and the more that you actually do know, the more you realize how little you actually know about anything. And it's the same with birds. I mean, one of the most fascinating things about birding is just the amount of things we don't know. And if you think of the birders, most of the birders sort of crammed in Cairns, in the far north. You've got this whole Cape York Peninsula, this massive area of land that's, even though birders go there, they go into particular spots, and it's just how much we don't know is just mind-boggling when you think about it.
Absolutely, and I think it's the interconnection of birding with other aspects of the natural world. So, and you mentioned the joy of birding there with the Nordmann's Greenshank. But so to conclude, because I don't want to take too much of your time.
No, we can still crack on.
Oh, brilliant! Well, it's been great, and so from that discovery and from your life of birding thus far, I'm going to choose this question. Do you have any tips or advice for young or new birders just starting out? Because I know there are some that listen to this show, and it can be daunting, right? To embark on something.
It's very daunting. I'd say the key thing is you will find that group. So if you live in Cairns and you're a young birder, there's a really good birding community here. I'd say subscribe to the New Frogmouth newsletter at the very least. Get those regular reports. Don't be afraid to go. It's a very welcoming group. So they do a lot of Saturday, Sunday birding. So don't be afraid to sort of go with your parent. If you are really young, I'm not saying a 16-year-old. If you're very young, don't be afraid to sort of ask your parents, can I go and check out this? And the parent might suggest it anyway. If they know they're into that, and sort of find out what's there. Because in some ways I feel as though I sort of missed out on that. I missed out on finding those people who did have that interest as well.
Yeah.
And I probably would have maybe learned a bit more, and maybe I maybe would have studied biology and maybe had a different life path. So definitely make those connections. Don't be afraid of not knowing anything. Don't be afraid of not being able to identify things. You're young, and you'll learn. And even the most experienced birders don't know things. I don't know lots of things about birding. Doesn't matter how long I've been. You forget things as well. My memory's not as good as it used to be. I forget things. It's I'll give you. So I'd say to a young birder, don't be afraid of not knowing anything. Get out there and sort of find the group, so you don't feel alone, that you feel as though there are other people. Get those contacts. Generally, most birders are very approachable, and they love spilling the beans on their knowledge. They love telling you things. They love, the storytelling of finding that rare bird, or finding that bird, or they love telling those stories, but they also don't know everything. Even who you think is the most experienced birder, they don't know everything, and they don't always get the ID right. I don't always get the ID correct. I make mistakes. Everybody does. Well, as we get older, we might sort of not admit it as much. We'll keep quiet about it. But no, we all make mistakes, and it's all part of the fun. It's all part of the fun of it. What else was I going to say? I would say there's quite a well-known local bird I was chatting to today. He was telling me this story about a guy who was like a world wading expert, and I think he was saying he was off somewhere remote with him, and they were doing some bird counts. But this guy said to him, I'd still struggle with lesser and greater sample of us, and this guy was a wading, a renowned, wading expert who admitted, that he still struggled with that, So I don't know the ins and outs of that particular story, because there are a few subspecies, and some have, the length of the bill's quite similar. But I think sometimes we don't admit that we don't know stuff,
And why do you think we do that psychologically? Because it lessens our impact on the surrounding people that are there, I suppose, isn't it?
I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose it's got it's got something to do with that, and that's why if I'm down the Esplanade, people preface conversations if they're a table lands bird, they'll preface it with stuff we already talked about, I don't really know waders, stuff like that. Even some very, very good birders, they admit they don't really know waders. So a lot of the time they'll preface their knowledge with that anyway, just in case they do make a mistake. I don't care, it's I'm quite happy to sort of inform people about the things that I know. I got not that I know everything, but it's a wonderful place to bird, the Esplanade. You just don't know what will show up. I actually had a new bird yesterday down the Esplanade.
What was it?
It was 3 glossy ibis did a fly past at the south end.
Really? And you had the first time you see them there?
I've never seen them on the
Wow.
Esplanade. Yeah, they
Yeah.
flew very close to the south end, very close to the lagoon, and then they flew off over to the inlet.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd never seen one before on the Esplanade.
Yeah.
You know,
There's always something
there's
new that
always
you can
something.
see.
Yeah, even though it's not like a rare bird. And I've been watching one at the Smithfield bypass swamp there there's been one there for about 4 or 6 weeks. So they're not super common down in the lowlands. You'll either see one pop around, or two, or if it rains a lot in the summer, you might see a flock of 45.
Yeah.
That's been my experience of a glossy ibis. You won't see them for like 9 months, and then you'll see one.
Yeah.
Or the one I've seen at Smithfield bypass has been there for like weeks.
And
then it'll rain a lot, and then all of a sudden 45 will appear out of nowhere in a field. It's like, how did they know all the good stuff was here? Well, I've now never seen these birds.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
How did they know this food was going to show up in this spot when they're never down in the lowlands? They're always hanging around. Up on the tablelands.
And I think part of the joy of birding is that birds are so different between them, each species and each different family. They're so wildly different. And it just brings you to these places. And so to start concluding, I'm always interested to ask birders if they have any particular interest in other aspects of the natural world. For example, I'm getting quite into butterflies. I quite enjoy learning about them. And I'm interested in sort of the whole sphere, generally speaking. But is there anything that you are drawn to apart from birds and nature?
For sure, definitely interested. Like I said at the beginning, I'm sort of a little bit polymathic in what I'm interested in. So apart from the 6 Australian bird field guides that I've got, basically from when I emigrated here in '92, you sort of regularly buy one every few years, and so the last one I bought is the compact, CSIRO one, the one with the red cover. I bought that fairly recently. And I've got the one before that was the blue, Australian bird guide one, the CSRM, which is excellent. Pictures and that, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I've got 9 bird field guides from other parts of the world. So whenever I've been somewhere like, South America, even though my list is quite embarrassing, and we won't talk about that, I've still got the field guide for South America. I've got for India and Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. So I've got 9 of those from other parts of the world, which is not a huge collection, but I've got 18 other field guides for different things. So mammals, lizards, spiders, cicadas, cetaceans, insects, butterflies, sea fishes, trees, plants. And then obviously with doing a geology degree, I'm interested in anything to do with the sciences as well. So yeah, I mean, those early experiences I had in Africa as well, were just quite amazing. I mean, when I look back at some of the things I've seen, it's like hard to believe, really. On that very first trip I did to Kenya, I went on this like a little minibus tour for a few days around the Masai Mara.
Yeah.
And so I got all the big 5, but one of the most incredible experiences I had there was we found a cheetah, which I wouldn't say they're common in the Masai Mara, but you do see them. And you will see them if you're on a tour. So we were watching this cheetah, and I think it was just sitting down, and then all of a sudden it just bolted. It bolted. It was like the fastest acceleration I've ever seen of any animal in my life.
Wow, yeah.
And, they get up to 70 miles an hour, apparently. I think that's true, isn't it? 70 miles an hour?
Very fast, yeah.
Really case. Bolted. Within a few seconds, it had caught a Thompson's gazelle. So this is stuff you see in a BBC documentary. And I just watched it, from the windows of this minibus. And, I look back at something like that and I'm like, God, how lucky was I? I'm not a wildlife photographer. I'm not a documentary maker. I just happened to be on this trip for a few days, and I saw that. So how you cannot help to be impressed by things like that. And one of the overriding thoughts I had when I got back from that trip was, yeah, you can watch something on TV, you can watch a documentary on TV, and it just pales into insignificance to real life. You know, it really, really does. If you have the opportunity to sort of get out there and see this stuff, make every effort to do so. You know, you don't need to go on an expensive tour. You can, you know, I just basically backpacked by myself and I found a cheap tour, you know, in Nairobi, you know, and just hopped on with that. In fact, when I arrived in Nairobi the first time, I looked out, I was in the lobby of this, you know, really cruddy sort of hotel I was staying in, you know, it was really horrible. Because it was cheap, you know, and I was backpacking. And there were these 3 guys from London zookeepers that had just packed in the job, and they wanted to go to Africa. And they just hired a car, and they were going to go to Nairobi National Park, and they just saw me in the lobby, you know. I thought, I had a little chat with me, said, "Oh, do you want to come with us? But, you know, we're going around Nairobi National Park." So, you know, so that was brilliant to go around with zookeepers, because they knew all the animals from all the poo.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, there's a rhinoceros here, you know, herd of elephants. Well, it couldn't be hard to spot with the poo with the elephants, but, you know, that was interesting to go around with them. You know, we had this scary experience with a rhino, you know, that looked as though it was going to charge us. And we were in like one of these Suzuki Sierra Jeeps, you know, we just wanted to destroy us, you know.
Yeah.
Remember the guy whacking it into reverse, you know, speeding on out of there. So, you know, I've been to something like, you know, around about 45 countries around the world. I've done every continent except Antarctica. So
45, that's a lot of countries. It's more than most people, definitely.
And
wow.
you know, so I've seen a lot of animals in a lot of different places, and you know, it's sure, the thing I'm most interested in birds, but you know, I'm definitely interested in everything and anything. You know, I love seeing stick insects in the garden. We get some massive ones here, some really big ones. You know, so that's really nice. Always take a photo of them and get the ruler out and stick the ruler out against it, you know. And you'll see with a lot of the, you know, the Facebook birders, they'll also post all their mammal sightings. And
or reptiles as well.
Sightings, you know. So there's a lot of birders are really interested in a lot of other things as well. And so, I did grow up with that interest as well, you know, because in living in a temperate country, you know, in the summer's diametrically opposite to the winter. You know, life just bursts forth. So you get all the butterflies and insects, and the big bumblebees come into the garden, and so you do develop an interest in absolutely everything, you know. So my parents did have, you know, all those, you know, books themselves, you know, guides to everything, you know. So you know, so you sort of absorb all that via osmosis, don't you? So, but I'm really interested in, you know, astronomy and space and physics, and I'm interested in, you know, I used to love drawing cars when I was a kid, so I love car design, I love aesthetics, and, you know, architecture and history and archaeology, you name it. I mean, I'm not saying I know everything about all those things. I'm just, you know, if you have, you know, if you want to learn things, you just basically gravitate to wanting to learn something about everything, and that's really a driver behind the travel for me. You know, is to, you know, Renee and I just, where do we want to go? You know, it was like the first trip we did. Well, we want to go to Egypt, so we went to Egypt we had like a 4-month trip round. We did Kenya, Egypt, and interrailed around Europe. You know, it was like. So we've basically been to all the big sites in Egypt, you know, we've done that. And, you know, we've done a lot of things. You know, I've been to Machu Picchu and, you know, Isla del Sol in Bolivia and, you know, Colca Canyon with the Andean. You know, I was going to go through, you know, some interesting birds I've seen some places.
Please do, some crazy bird experiences.
Well, I'll get back to Kenya. So there was a movie, I think it was in the mid-80s, called Out of Africa, which I think was based on a novel by I think it's a Danish author. I forget her name now. But in the movie, you know, is this classic video of Lake Nakuru, you know, with 2 million pink flamingos. So, well, that's one of the first things I did out of Nairobi after this Nairobi National Park trip. I got on this small tour that did Masai Mara and Nakuru. And I remember coming down the Great Rift Valley Escarpment looking in the distance at Lake Nakuru, and I was sort of like said to the driver, I said, oh, it's all pink, isn't it? The lake, you know, I mean, it was miles away, you know. So oh, the lake's all pink. He said, yeah, that's all the flamingos. When you actually get down there, there were at that time, when I first went there in 1989, there was about 2 million greater and lesser flamingos in that lake. And it just mind-blowing. I just felt as though I'd landed in the Garden of Eden. You know, that's what if I could, I'm not a religious person, but, you know, that was what I thought when I got there. I thought, if there's a Garden of Eden anywhere, I'd say, oh, this is it. You know, It's just, you know, the weather was perfect. There was African fish eagles, and, you know, there was lions there, and, you know, kudu and rock hyrax and all sorts of little critters, and, you know, were the hippos there? Probably, can't remember. You know, marabou stork, and, you know, all sorts of different stuff. But just the noise from the flamingos was just unbelievable. Just to see that mass of life, you know, was just an amazing experience.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I went back with Renee probably about 4 or 5 years later, and there was a bit of pollution that got into the lake, and there was just nothing there. So
really,
I think it's improved since then. And there's also a couple of lakes that we went to, like Lake Bogoria in the north, that had them. But I sometimes I think never go back. If you've been somewhere and you've got a great memory of it, leave it at that. Don't go back to it.
Interesting.
I thought that after going back, and it was, you know, I wouldn't say I was disappointed. Well, I was a bit disappointed because I wanted to show Renee, you know. So there was that. But there was some of the things I remember, you know, seeing a greater roadrunner in Mexico running next to a car, you know, after you'd seen like Warner Brothers movies.
Yeah.
As a birdie, you're like, you know what it looks like. You know, it's like, oh my God, it's a great roadrunner. You know, it's
amazing.
That.
Uh-huh.
White-tailed tropic birds in Samoa. That was the end of a 6-month trip. So that was really special, because I really wanted to see a pair of white-tailed tropic birds, and I knew they got them in Samoa. And we were there for 2 weeks, I think, over Christmas and New Year. And that was 1999. So that was the end of our 6-month trip, that 6-month trip. And we were like, where can we go in the world? You know, everybody was going to the first sunset of the year 2000. And we thought, we'll go to the last sunset of 1999. Where's that? And it was at that time, it was in Western Samoa.
Wow.
At a place called Cape Mulinu'u. So, and they had this choir singing on the beach, and, you know, they had there was only about 200 people there. It was like really quite empty, and we watched the last sunset basically for 1999.
Wow.
And so I knew they had, you know, white-tailed tropic birds there, and I went to the government office and I got this big post that had all the birds in Samoa, and it's a white-tailed tropic bird. Anyway, we were there for 2 or 3 weeks, hadn't seen sight nor sound of white-tailed tropic bird. And the day we left, we were going on the minibus out to the airport. And the drive to the airport from Apia is absolutely beautiful. It's just full of lagoon. It's right by the lagoons and the ocean. You've got blue sky, you know, you've got palm trees. You've got these, the Royal Poincianas, which are the flame trees that you get in Madagascar that basically spread all around the world. We get them here. And it's just gorgeous. And I was feeling really melancholy. You know, we just had this fantastic trip for 6 months, and we were leaving the island, and I was just staring out the window, and what do you know, a pair of white-tailed tropic birds, like almost in slow motion, flying towards me, fly towards the minibus, fly over the minibus, and that's gone. And that's the only time I've ever seen white-tailed tropic birds, and that is just a perfect memory.
Amazing.
And so that, for many years, that was just my absolute favourite bird.
I got goosebumps then. That's incredible, really.
Yeah,
you know?
And if you look at my avatar for my email address, it's actually a pair of white-tailed tropic birds, you know.
Yeah.
So that was it for me for many years, was with and it's still one of my favourite birds, even though that I basically saw them for about, 15 seconds. But it was just tied up in this just fantastic trip we did. You know, it was like our first round the world trip where we sort of traveled together for a long time. I mean, we'd done the Europe trip before that, but this was like something special about that trip.
And it's such a split second, isn't it? It's a split second of your life, really, 15 seconds.
That's it.
And then you remember it for so long, and it goes back to what you said about not wanting to go back necessarily, but leaving it as a memory.
And I saw you did a video of like a mountain. Is it Karakara? How do you pronounce that again?
Oh yeah,
Karakara.
the Chimango Caracara.
Yeah. So I saw Chimango Karakara in Easter Island.
Oh right, yeah.
So I don't mention this to you as well. I found those fascinating raptors because you just see them all over the
Oh,
place
they're
in
great.
Easter Island.
They're great, yeah, and they're all over Santiago in Chile.
And it's just a fantastic name. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic bird.
Yeah.
You know, so I was a bit obsessed with those birds. I didn't see a whole lot of different species on Easter Island. I saw great frigate bird and the caracaras, and I think they don't get a great deal of species. They get Diuca finches, I think, is
Yeah,
one
that's right. Yeah,
ones that
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember.
yeah. Mm.
But I think the Chimango caracara is an import anyway. I don't think they occurred naturally on Easter Island. I think they.
Oh, that's a good question. That's
I'm
very
not
good
100% on that.
Mm.
Maybe you need to ask your Chilean wife.
Yeah,
the
maybe.
answer.
Yeah. Oh, but that's great.
We had a brilliant experience in Easter Island because it's somewhere I'd always wanted to go since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So to go somewhere and see the statues and, stuff you'd seen in old books, and it was just fantastic. And so we actually went round with this old bloke in a taxi, and we just paid him, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was better than any tour you could go on because he'd lived there for like a couple of decades, and he just knew all the little nooks and crannies. And he just took us to places the tour buses didn't go,
Yeah.
And we had a wonderful experience there. Been to the Amazon, so we hoatzins. That's a classic bird to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Prehistoric looking birds. That was really interesting. I got hit in the face by the tail of a violet-tailed sylph in Mindo. So that's a hummingbird with a really long tail. So that was a funny experience. Andean condors, in Colca Canyon.
Of course.
Just magic. But paradoxically, after that experience, we went to Bolivia, to La Paz, and La Paz has got this big zoo, which it's not the best kept zoo in the world. And they've got this enormous aviary, almost like that Jurassic Park aviary in Jurassic Park 3.
I love that movie.
I thought, this is Jurassic Park. But, instead of pterodactyls, they had Andean condors in there. And they were just hopping around. They couldn't fly. And I felt so sorry for them.
Oh.
I just felt so sad because I'd just seen them wild in the natural habitat in Colca Canyon. And then to see them just forlorn and hopping around in this, aviary was my most depressing thing, and the animals weren't treated terrifically, and I must admit. I think people threw, lollies and chupa chups at the monkey. So, you'd see it. You could get a good picture of a monkey with a stuck in a chupa chup. But, well, it wasn't the best, advertisement for the zoo.
Right.
But giant hummingbirds in Peru as well. I was just amazed by that.
A lot of these birds, in Chile, they get a lot of. I lived in Chile for 4 years, and it's great birding. Giant hummingbird, Andean condor, and the Chimango caracara, the mountain caracara. It's a great species. Yeah, it's like a.
I've seen a mountain caracara. I looked at my list. I've actually seen one. I just couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
Humboldt penguin. That was interesting to see those on Islas Ballestas. You don't expect to see penguins that far.
It's incredible.
North, do you?
No,
they do,
right.
because the currents are so cold. They follow the currents up the coast of Chile, and
they're so rich. Absolutely.
Just so rich in nutrients. I had a very interesting experience in Iguazu Falls on the Argentinian side. So we'd just seen Iguazu Falls, and we were just leaving. And we just hopped in the minibus, and the sun was setting. And I was looking at the sun setting, and I was going, gee, it's just a bit weird, isn't it? And what's that bird there next to the sun? That big black and white bird, And I couldn't see the bill, and I was like, what the hell is that bird? It's huge, And then I suddenly realised that I think there's something called inattentional blindness. Like you're looking at something, but you can't see it.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenological effect that even though you're actually looking at something, you can't actually see the thing that you're looking at. So I was looking at this black and white bird, and I was looking at the setting sun next to the black and white bird. And then after a few seconds, it suddenly clicked that wasn't the setting sun. That was actually the bill of the bird. So it was a toko toucan.
Wow, really?
And my brain had completely tricked me into thinking I was looking at the setting sun, which you might think, how can you make that mistake? But it was sort of far enough away to sort of in a tree. and the sun was to trick my brain, and I just found that in itself, that experience really fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And if it's a foreign place to you, then you're not used to the birds, of course. So
You're not used to the birds,
yeah.
and that was like the first and only time I saw Toko toucan. I didn't see one before or after.
Amazing.
Um,
Amazing. Yeah.
um, an Egyptian vulture fleetingly, on the way to the Taj Mahal. I remember that very clearly because that's a bird, flicking through my European field guide as a teenager was like,
Yeah.
well, I'd love to see one of these.
Definitely. Yeah.
Bang, just recognized it straight away. It was just in a field. And because of my dad's bird book, I always wanted to see a European hoopoe.
Oh yeah.
So I finally saw one in India. I think near Keoladeo National Park, which is in Bharatpur, which is actually about an hour's drive from the Taj Mahal, which is in Agra. So that's a fantastic national park. I saw quite a few species there. It's a magical place. I'd definitely go back there.
Yeah.
What else? There was rhinoceros hornbills in Borneo. They're just brilliant. And one of the all-time favourites of mine was wandering albatross on the Wollongong pelagic that I did a few years ago. And that's the one thing I really want to do a lot of. I think as I get older, I really want to do a lot of pelagics.
Right.
And it's just family getting older. It's just having the opportunity to do that sort of stuff. So hoping in the next few years we'll get to do quite a lot of pelagics. I really want to do that. So they actually on those Wollongong trips they actually capture birds and ring them. So they actually captured one of the wanderings and it was there on the boat. They are just massive.
Yeah.
They are just fantastic birds. To
Big
get
animal.
that close, and just to think that was 35 miles offshore from, I think it was 35 kilometers or miles, I can't remember exactly, offshore from this, Sydney and Wollongong. It's just mind blowing. It was mind blowing to me, and we saw 6 on that trip, and it was a December trip, and you don't usually see them in December, so I felt really lucky. But I just couldn't, and that, obviously there's lots of other albatross species you get out there, and I'm just so impressed with pelagic species. You're like, how do they find the food? And they come from nowhere. You're on the boat in the middle of nowhere and you just chuck some chum out. And all of a sudden there's like, there's like 30 species flapping around the boat. It's like, how did they get there? How did they, just phenomenal sense of smell. And obviously, this boat chugging along, they probably clock onto, here's the humans again with some, with some food for us.
I mean, we always sing the praises of Cairns as one of the best places to bird, but that's the one thing it's really lacking, isn't it? A proper pelagic deep sea environment.
It is.
It's close, isn't it?
It does. And even though we would not get nowhere near the amount of species, you'd get, on the colder sort of tours, well, it's especially the Tasmanian one. You'd still get some birds, wouldn't you? You'd still get some interesting, and you don't know. Like we don't have a pelagic, so how do you know unless you go? And some of the exploration vessels that do go further out do have records of interesting birds. So
it's underbirded.
It's one of my big dreams I've got in the back pocket for when I retire. Is like could I buy a boat? Could I just could I do a birding year on a boat around that, to circumnavigate Australia and also, do the land as well. But, you're maximizing the pelagic species you're going to see, as well as, stopping off at all the land points and doing that.
That's a great idea. Do it, definitely.
Do it. So that's something I've been thinking about as well. I thought that would be awesome, wouldn't it? I don't know whether anybody's ever done it either. I've never seen. That'd be a great book, wouldn't it? Around Australia on a boat. Write about all the birds that you've seen.
That's your retirement sorted, Adrian. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. So,
and in terms of the let's round it off and wrap up. So I always ask a couple of last questions to close the discussion, which has been fantastic, and thanks for your time.
That's all right.
So 2-part question: favorite bird, and then what would be your dream bird that you haven't seen yet that you'd like to see?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned this for a long time. It was, it was the white-tailed tropic bird.
Right.
It was. I don't like to pick favourites, because at the end of the day, you know, it's like you think about stuff. What did I get the most excited about? You know, what sort of really did it for me? And obviously, Nordmanns. I'm very fond of that bird.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was something really romantic about, you know, seeing the white-tailed tropic bird. And you know, the hoopoe as well. Just absolutely love that bird. It was fantastic, and to see that bird, you know, I think I first saw it in my 30s. You know, after it being a dream bird from when I was, you know, 12 years old or whatever. From where, you know, just seeing that little picture on the back of my dad's bird book, you know, oh God, I'd love to see one of those. And you did actually get them in the south of England, quite rarely. I think they're probably a little bit more common now in the south of England, but they're still not, you know, I'm not seen all the time. But to actually see one of those was just I just remember the day I saw it in India. I can't remember what town it was in, and it was just in a park somewhere. I was like, oh,
wow.
It's a hoopoe, you know. It's just magic to actually see one, you know. And I saw loads of them in the Tar Desert. We camped out in the Tar Desert, which is in near Jaisalmer, western India. And yeah, I saw quite a few of them out there on the edge of desert. You know, they sort of seem to be a habitat that they, you know, seem to thrive in there. So
wow, and your whole life would flash before you, because it'd been so long since you've been looking for it. You know.
Well, this is it, and it's also the fact that, you know, I mean, I knew they were in India, but I wasn't. You know, I wasn't because, you know, I'm on this trip with Renee, you know, and it's like a whole cultural wildlife everything tour, you know, when, you know, we have to accommodate what Renee wants to see as well and stuff. So, you know, we did go to places like Cairns, you know, to sort of accommodate some of my passion for the birds and stuff. But, you know, Renee really loved it as well. You know, we hired a couple of bikes and just cycled around. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. Amazing,
you know, experience. But yeah, seeing a hoopoe was I just remember that day. It was like, oh my God, this bird is so ridiculous. It's pink, for God's sake, with this stupid big crest, you know.
Yeah, right.
And it's just like, why, you know, how did this bird ever evolve, you know? It's just magic, absolutely magic, you know. So yeah, it's very hard to pick one. So I'd pick three there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I went back to England in February, you know, and I loved watching the redshanks, the common redshanks. Absolutely, I couldn't get enough of them.
Yeah,
because it's a wading bird, and, you know, we don't really get it here. You know, it's a vagrant to Australia. So that was great, just to go back to Southport and just see loads of them.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. And you mentioned you weren't a lister, but does that impede you in responding to the dream bird, your next sort of target, so to speak?
Well, this is another subject that you could probably talk about. You know, there's not just one type of lister, is there, Thomas? You know, there's lots of different types of lister. Me saying I'm not a lister is not exactly true, is
right?
You know, I mean, I've always kept lists.
Right.
You know, I'm a lister in some form. You know, maybe we need a classification system for listers.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, no, and actually grade people, you know, as to exactly what kind of lister they are. So,
right.
Yeah, I do make lists, and, you know, I do. You know, if I get down to the Esplanade early, you know, one of the things I want to do is go, okay, let's see how many I can see. You know, I'm not just looking to find interesting birds. I'm going to take my time. I'm not rushing through it madly. You know, I'm taking my time. You know, the scooter's great because I can do the whole thing really quickly, you know, get to spots very quickly. Because sometimes the tide is sometimes slow, sometimes it's quick. So the scooter's really handy to get to different spots.
I've got to say, it's brilliant. It's brilliant mode of transport.
And so, you know, that's something I really enjoy. You know, I really enjoy getting a really good big list. You know, I have a good day, you know, and like, you know, mid-40s is a great list. You know, I think mid-50s is a fantastic list, you know. So, you know, aiming for a 60 list, you know, see if I can get a 60 list one morning, you know. But all the boxes have to tick for a really big list, though. You know, the tide has to be right. It's probably best during the peak migration to have your chances of seeing, you know, the occasional bird that's not so common. You know, red knots do drop in occasionally, but, you know, I saw two the other day, but they're not always there. So you just got to look out a bit, you know, and see some stuff, you know, like and I'll start right at the end of where the marina is, on that next to where the $1 million boats are, because I'll spot stuff there that I won't see anywhere else, sometimes.
Yeah, and you do the whole list as the Cairns Esplanade hotspot. This is another thing. We're going on for ages now, but
exactly. We could talk about that as well, because I think we were talking about this. It's for really important hotspots. I think they need boundaries.
Yeah,
because I just use the Cairns Esplanade, but there is a north and a south hotspot as well, and I tend to not use those. I've used them sometimes, but I tend not to use them.
In which situations do you use them?
Well, like with the Nordmann's Greenshank, I did actually use them sometimes to go, at least I've seen them at those hotspots. Seen the bird at those hotspots. But yeah, I don't do it generally, because in my mind I'm like, the whole Esplanade is the hotspot. I just want a central point. And then I can see by my master list of that hotspot of how many birds I've seen.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Because if you go out to Townsville, the Townsville Town Common, there is a hotspot for Townsville Town Common. There might be a couple of others there, but there is one main list for Townsville Town Common. I'd be surprised if some birders don't do the same thing. They'll just pick that as their main locale point. And Townsville Town Common's list is very similar to Cairns Esplanade in terms of the numbers they've seen down there. But I think geographically it's actually a much bigger area, I think.
Right.
I haven't measured it or whatever. I don't want to, talk about the turn or anything.
Well, it goes back to the definition of a hotspot in eBird. They should be sufficiently different to be worthwhile hotspots.
Well, this is it. And it's also if you get somewhere first and you go, I'd like this to be a hotspot, you can suggest it as a hotspot. And then whoever's moderating that will go, yeah, okay, we'll make that a hotspot. So I did that with the Smithfield bypass. Basically, when it first opened, I'd go down the track and there was a bit of a wetland there. And I thought, no, this has not been accessible before. It's only because of the bicycle track there it's now accessible. And there's no hotspots anywhere near here apart from Katana Wetlands, which is his home hotspot. So I basically thought, well, I'm logging birds here. I can put a personal hotspot, but nobody else can see it. And I think a lot of eBirders like to have the hotspots. And so I basically just suggested a hotspot. And so, that's basically used as a hotspot, Smithfield bypass walking track. So you can use that for, any length of that track if you want. And that's the thing that maybe would be nice to be sorted out, is for some of the major ones is, do you think it's a good idea to have boundaries for those hotspots, so that we're clear on, where the start and end of that hotspot is. It's obviously not on the pinpoint of the hotspot.
That's right.
It actually goes away from that. Where does it end?
Yeah. It's very nebulous, isn't it?
It's nebulous. How far can I stretch this? Like with the Cairns Esplanade, I go right to the end of that grassy bit where the mangroves are.
Oh, you do? Right. Okay.
I don't go to the end of the beach. I include that grassy bit of the north end because the water comes up there with the mangroves.
Right.
So you'll get the mangrove robin there and other species. You get the rail there and species that you don't see elsewhere on the Esplanade. And so I'd actually got a black-faced monarch there once, which I was really surprised by, and I've never seen it since. I've seen it years ago, but I've never seen it since. Occasionally you get dollar birds down there a couple of times, but there's some things crop up there that don't crop up down the rest of the Esplanade.
Right.
So I think that's fine. I'm happy with that, and if I'm happy with it, I'm going to do it. It's not exactly that far from the end of where the sand is it? It's only another 100 meters of and the ocean does come to that edge. So
definitely, it is like I say, nebulous. Because and every birder or every eBirder has their own rules, so to speak.
Plus, if you see you're seeing things that are way offshore, and the more powerful the camera, the further you're seeing. So I'm seeing stuff on the navigation. It's still on the Cairns Esplanade list because I'm on the Cairns Esplanade.
Yeah, that's right.
And I also, if I see a bird that is from that grassy point that I can see flying or can hear, if I hear a channel bill cuckoo, Am I not going to put it on the list? I'm actually standing in the Cairns what I consider the zone of the Cairns Esplanade. Do I not put that bird in because it's flying in nearer to another hotspot? No, I'm just going to put it on that hotspot.
Yeah.
So.
And there was discussion about this on I forget the details, but whether a bird can be counted, a bird species can be counted as Australian if you see it from Australia, but in the Torres Strait Islands. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Because there's is there an island, one of the islands that you can actually at low tide walk across? I think it's so shallow.
Yeah, something like that. Something ridiculous. Where
you can walk across from Papua New Guinea, over to this island that's in Australia.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so true. Yeah, you're standing on this island. It's technically Australian territory. Do you count it? Or don't you? Well, where's the rules? We love rules, don't we? We love to classify the birds. We love to ID the birds. We love for them to have a definite species and subspecies. So. But that eBird has become a very popular tool. So maybe it's time to start thinking about that aspect of it as well. How it's going to be a bit more structured. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's. I mean, I don't know when eBird started, but I've been on eBird since 2014. So. It's sort of almost like the early days of the internet. It's like the Wild West.
Yeah,
it's like anything goes on this platform, and it's like with anything, the internet's got gradually more and more regulated, and eBird's probably getting more and more regulated, and what happens with it, and more, the resourcing is getting more and more accessible in terms of the data and how you can access that data and use the data. I mean, I wish everybody used it because it is just a phenomenal resource, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so especially anybody doing masters or PhD, any sort of research, on any species you're doing. I mean, you've got to be looking at eBird, haven't you? It's not capturing all the data, but then again, even if you capture as much data as you can for a bird species that you're studying, you're still not going to capture everything anyway, aren't you? There's still a lot of unknowns. So it's a very good tool for sort of capturing what you know. And I absolutely love it. As soon as I found out about it, bang, was on it and joined it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, for sure. And it helps to expand the knowledge, doesn't it? To new birders as well and younger birders.
It helps with your memory. You look back through your life list and you go,
yeah,
oh, what's that bird? Don't remember that one.
Well, that's another reason I love photography as well. If I've got a photo of it, I'm going to remember it.
That's it. Absolutely, you're definitely going to remember it if you got a photograph. Yeah. Although if you're my age, you might not remember it at all.
Oh well,
this is a false memory. Someone implanted this memory.
Final question, Adrian. It's been an absolute joy. Dream destination. If you had 2 weeks with no commitments and no family and unlimited expenses, where would you go for 2 weeks for birding?
Wow, this is the one question I actually didn't give any thought to. Where would I go? I would probably go to Antarctica. It's the one continent I haven't been to. So, I'd probably go down to Ushuaia.
Oh yeah,
and because I think that's basically where you access it traditionally from, isn't it?
Mm.
And there's obviously quite a lot of tours that go from that area, and I think I'd do that, because you'd basically get all those southern oceanic birds as well on your way down to Antarctica, as well as the penguins. So yeah, I think it would have to be Antarctica. But I doubt I'd be able to go on my own. Renee would definitely come with me.
Well, that's
she
wonderful.
Would not let me go on my own. Yeah. And I would not want to go without her either. So,
There you go. Well, that's a great note to end on, So let's wrap it up. Adrian, it's been an absolute joy. You've been a fantastic guest, and I think this episode is going to be the longest yet of the show, so that's brilliant.
Oh, you're not going to edit anything out?
I don't think I will. I think we're all, everything we talked about was interesting and engaging, and I think the listeners will agree with that. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I think we could probably just talk for a lot longer as well.
I think so. We'll have you on the show again. I think. And
Yeah, when I find the next mega, get me on.
will do. Hey, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
It's
I
going to
mean, we
happen.
didn't even talk about the Ruff. I mean, that was a big bird, wasn't it?
That's true. Yeah.
that was an awesome bird.
Have you got 1 minute to discuss that?
Yeah, that was. Well, I was pretty lucky actually with that bird because I'd been in the UK in February,
Right.
obviously for sad reasons. My father had died. But I met up with Ron, my mum's cousin who lives there, and we did some birding and went back to Martin Mere. So that was just fantastic to go back to those childhood haunts. And yeah, I got some really good photos of Ruff right next to the bird hide, and I think I think most of the ones I saw must have been males because they were fairly big and chunky, and really pot-bellied.
Yeah.
Very distinctive, really bright orange legs. And the thing I find about a Ruff that I remembered instantly, actually, from when I was a child, was the eye. There's something about the eye. It's the eye of a Ruff. I don't think another bird has an eye that looks like that. There's something about the shape of it. I've spoken to you about this. It's almost like a little bit squinty and pinched, and it's something very noticeable about that. And in combination with the head, but it's just like a bit ridiculous looking. It's just out of proportion, pot-bellied, short black bill, squinty eye. It's a really distinctive bird. Especially, and that's just the non-breeding, version of it. Never mind the breeding version of it.
Right.
I mean, if you read the literature on it, it's just like crazy the amount of like plumage, the coloration. I don't know whether it's classed as polymorphism, but it's just incredible the amount of colours. The male Ruff can sport. It's just such a unique bird.
Yeah.
And so I'd clocked it. I clocked them, you see, and then I got asked to write an article for Contact Call for BirdLife North Queensland's newsletter for December, and I was like, talk about waders you like, a few waders you like. And I was like, okay, what can I write about? What can I write about? And I was like, well, they haven't asked me just to write about Esplanade waders, Why don't I talk about the Ruff? Because Ruff was a really lovely bird that I used to love looking at in England, and hey, you get them here as well. Really, really rare, but that would still be of interest to Australians.
Yeah,
because, Australians. Do have the opportunity of seeing them, occasionally. They will show up, in Brisbane, or down near Melbourne. They'll show up, and then hordes of, twitchers will just, converge.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, that'll be interesting, won't it? So there was on the Sunday, the 30th of October. So I wrote all this stuff about the Ruff, wrote about a few other waders. 4 o'clock came, I was itching to bird, get out of the house. Thought I'll go to Katana Wetlands, which is my local spot. I'm driving down there and I'm like, hang on, I'll go to Dunne Rd Swamp because it's only another kilometre past Katana. And there's sometimes some interesting stuff there. And I hadn't actually been there for like, a few weeks. And I thought there'd been a bit of rain, and it tends to sort of fill up with a bit of rain. Even though it's got mangroves there and it appears to be brackish and very salty, I think the water table might be quite high there. So if it gets rain, it sort of mixes in, and it's because the Dunne Rd can flood over from Avondale Creek, all the fresh water that comes down, especially after a cyclone or whatever. So I get down to the swamp and, oh, wow, look at all the Sharpies, fantastic, all these juvenile Sharpies. And the place is going off. I've never seen it so busy, I thought it's just magic. Look at this, wonderful. So there's 2 spots. There's the first spot that I crept to because, I didn't want to scare the birds. And then I creep round the corner to where you can see more of the water there. And I'm like, I'd zoom in on this group of Sharpies. And like, instantly I'm like, this Sharpie, this big bird, this big Sharpie's got its back to me. Bright yellow legs, And I'm like, hang on a sec,
yeah.
that's not, I didn't even finish thinking about it when it just turned its head. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, I recognize it straight away. It's like imprinted on my memory of being a teenager in the UK. I'm like, it's a bloody Ruff. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I just couldn't believe it. I just almost fell over. I'm like, and then you look in and I was zoomed in at 3000 mil plus, 2 times, so it was a little bit pixelated, and I was photographing, videoing. I've got to prove that this is a bloody Ruff. Nobody's going to believe me, because this is like, I can't have just written this article about it and then just see one, because this bird, right. Nobody's going to believe it, because this bird, even though it's a regular rare visitor to Australia, this one at the swamp, I looked on eBird. I'm pretty sure it was the 5th of this year. So that's crazy. That's crazy. And I've not seen a Ruff there before at that swamp. I've seen some, interesting birds there, but I've not seen a Ruff there. Not seen a Ruff there before. I mean, it's a classic Ruff habitat, sort of place it'd love. And it does love it because it's still there. I saw it this morning.
Wow.
It's going strong. It's still there. But the water because we had a lot of hot days, there's hardly any water. There's not a lot of water left in there now. There's still a lot of species there.
Right.
But it's not going to be there for much longer, I think. I'll go check it out tomorrow morning before work, but we'll see how much longer it lasts. So, so that was just incredible.
There you go.
See that bird, and it turns out it's. I actually, because I'd not looked at the literature for a little bit on the specific plumages, I thought, is this a juvenile? Because the coverts were popping out, and the legs threw me off as well. I said, why has it got yellow legs? Because I was expecting it to have orange legs. But then I thought, is it a juvie then I realised later it's actually a female, because the females are a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit bigger than the Sharpies, but probably not quite as distinct. If a male was there, that'd be a lot more distinctive because they're a lot bigger.
Right, yeah.
And all the ones I remember seeing all had orange legs, but yellow legs, are common with the.
Yeah, isn't it great? I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt, that a bird like that can gather so many birders. We met that guy from Spain, remember?
I was really impressed. Talk about what's a good birder. I mean, this guy's visiting Australia for the first time. How long had he been here? A couple of months?
If that.
Wow. I mean, he was picking things out left, right and centre that I thought there's no, someone who was just busy, even if they were a birder, would sort of struggle with. Because he'd obviously just been going full on the whole time he'd been here.
Yeah, that impressed me as well. It really did, because I
thought, good on you. Wow. I mean, he was on his own, and that's all he was doing. I think all he was doing was birding. He was a serious birder. But I was very impressed with his skills. Having been only in the country for 2 months, I thought, wow, this is really knocking it out of the park.
That's right. Yeah.
So like you say, it brings a bird like that brings everybody down there. So I've been down there every morning at 5:30, apart from one morning. And like within half an hour, there's another 2 or 3 birders showing up.
Every morning, every time.
Every morning, there's 2 or 3, and then I have to go at 10 to 7. To go take the girls to school and go to work. But I look at the checklist. People are still showing up there after me. So. Yeah, so there's probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 people have seen it so far, maybe.
It just brings us together, and it's the joy of birding, and that's what this show's about.
It's the joy, and it's great to actually be the guy who found it, and also, then show other people. That's nice as well. It felt like the Nordmanns all over again a little bit. Because if you're clocking it for a little bit, as there are a lot of Sharpies there, and it's sort of, if you've not seen it before and you've never seen a Ruff before, you can sort of look at it and go, is that it? And if you're not that confident, so it's been good to sort of I suppose help people sort of find it as well.
Yeah.
Sort of clock it.
And it happened with the Asian dowitcher as well. And I think it's just a result. You're out there so often. You really are. So do you,
yeah, well, absolutely. Too much. I need to be banned. So, this guy's getting too much. Get it? He's
not at all. Like, hey,
get him out of there.
keep on going. I mean,
not another bloody Asian called Binturn. Get him out. This guy's seen too much.
Oh, that's another thing we could
Ban
touch on. Hey, but it's been great. I'll let you go. This has been fabulous, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed hosting the episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it too, Adrian.
I have. No, it's been great time. It's been great to catch up. Yeah, I look forward to for us to catching up again. In the real world.
We will
do some real birding again. Yeah.
Let's do it. All right, Adrian. You have a good night.
All right, we'll do, mate.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of the Birding Today podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about the show, you can follow me on all my social media platforms. The links are in the description and in the show notes. And if you want to take it a step further, you can also support me on Patreon as well. Thank you, happy birding, and I'll catch you in the next episode.